You think I'd let him choose you? The slap echoed through the parlor before Emma could process her father's words. Her cheek burned, but not as hot as the fury in his eyes. Wyatt Brooks, the rancher everyone wanted, had just done the impossible. He'd chosen the wrong daughter, the worthless one, the one who wasn't supposed to matter. But standing there, tasting blood, Emma made a choice that would shatter everything. This is her story. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city so I can see how far this journey reaches. Now, let's begin. The morning started like every other morning in the Whitmore house, with Emma's hands already raw before sunrise. She stood at the kitchen basin, scrubbing yesterday's dinner plates while the sky outside bled from black to gray. Her fingers were cracked around the knuckles, permanently stained from lye soap and hard work. The kind of hands nobody looked at twice. The kind that didn't matter. Upstairs, she could hear her sister Lydia's voice, high and musical, laughing at something their mother said, probably about the dress. Everything this week had been about the dress. Silk the color of champagne, ordered special from a seamstress in town, fitted 3 times to make sure it hung just right on Lydia's perfect frame. Emma didn't own a dress like that. She owned 2 dresses total. The brown one she wore for daily work, and the gray one she wore to church. Both had been mended so many times the original fabric was hard to find. "Emma!" Her father's voice cut through the quiet like an axe through wood. "Where's my coffee?" She dried her hands quickly, wincing at the sting, and grabbed the pot from the stove. Her father sat at the head of the table, newspaper spread in front of him, not looking up. He never looked at her unless she'd done something wrong. Emma poured carefully, making sure not to spill a drop. "Wyatt Brooks arrives today," her father said, still reading. "Everything needs to be perfect. Your sister's future depends on it." "Yes, sir." "That means you stay in the kitchen, out of sight." Emma's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice level. "Yes, sir." He finally glanced up, his eyes cold and measuring. "I mean it, Emma. Don't embarrass us. Lydia's worked too hard for this." Lydia's worked too hard. Emma almost laughed. Lydia had spent the week getting her hair curled and her nails buffed. Emma had spent it scrubbing floors, mending linens, and preparing enough food to feed a small army. Also, the house would look impressive when Wyatt Brooks came calling, because that's what this was. A business transaction dressed up as courtship. Wyatt Brooks owned the largest cattle ranch in 3 counties. His family had money, land, and influence, and he was looking for a wife. When word got out that he'd be visiting families in the area to meet potential matches, every household with an unmarried daughter had gone into a frenzy. The Whitmores most of all. Thomas Whitmore, Emma's father, was a proud man with a failing farm and mounting debts he never talked about. But Emma knew. She saw the letters he burned in the fireplace late at night, heard the arguments with her mother behind closed doors. Lydia was their golden ticket. Beautiful, refined, accomplished in all the ways that mattered to men like Wyatt Brooks. She could play piano, recite poetry, and smile like sunshine itself. Emma could birth a calf, repair a wagon wheel, and work 16 hours without complaint. She knew which skill set their father valued. "Emma!" Her mother swept into the kitchen, already dressed in her best gown. "The parlor needs fresh flowers, and polish the silver again. I saw a spot." "I polished it yesterday." "Then polish it again." Her mother's voice was sharp, distracted. She was looking past Emma, toward the stairs where Lydia's laughter still floated down. "And for heaven's sake, tie your hair back properly. You look like a field hand." Emma's hand went automatically to her braid, which had come loose during the morning work. She tucked the stray pieces back, saying nothing. Her mother left without another word. The house continued its frantic preparations. Emma moved through it like a ghost, present but invisible, necessary but unwanted. She arranged roses in the parlor, repolished silver that didn't need polishing, and baked 3 different pies because her mother couldn't decide which one looked most impressive. By noon, Lydia finally came downstairs. She looked perfect. The champagne dress fit like it had been painted on. Her blonde hair was swept up in an intricate style that had probably taken an hour, and her cheeks had that fashionable flush that came from pinching them right before a gentleman arrived. "Oh, Emma," Lydia said, breezing past her in the hallway, "you have flour on your face." Emma wiped her cheek, finding the white smudge. "Thanks." Lydia paused, turning back with something almost like pity in her eyes. You know this is important, right? For all of us? I know. Father says if this works out, we'll be secure. No more worrying about the farm. Mother can finally get her new furniture. And I'll... She smiled, a dreamy look crossing her face. I'll be Mrs. Wyatt Brooks. Emma wondered if Lydia had ever actually met Wyatt Brooks, if she knew anything about him beyond his land and his money. But she didn't ask. You'll be great, Emma said instead, and meant it. Lydia had been trained for this her whole life. She knew how to be charming, how to make a man feel like the most important person in the room. Emma had been trained for other things. Thank you. Lydia squeezed her hand, the first genuine affection she'd shown in weeks. Then she was gone, gliding into the parlor where their mother waited. Emma went back to the kitchen. She was elbow-deep in bread dough when the sound of hoofbeats approached. Her stomach tightened despite herself. She moved to the window, staying back in the shadows where she wouldn't be seen. A man dismounted in the front yard. Wyatt Brooks was not what she expected. For one thing, he looked real. Not polished or refined or practiced. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing work clothes that had actually seen work, dusty boots, worn leather vest, hat that had been shaped by weather and use, not fashion. His face was tanned and angular, with lines around his eyes that came from squinting into sun, not smiling at parties. He looked like he belonged on a horse, not in a parlor. Emma's father rushed out to greet him, suddenly all smiles and hearty handshakes. The transformation was remarkable. Thomas Whitmore could turn on charm like a lantern when he needed to. Emma watched them exchange pleasantries, her father gesturing toward the house, Wyatt nodding politely but saying little. They disappeared inside. Emma forced herself back to the bread dough, kneading harder than necessary. It didn't matter what Wyatt Brooks looked like or how he carried himself. He was here for Lydia. By sunset, they'd probably be informally engaged. By next month, married. And Emma would still be here, invisible, working herself to bone while her sister lived in comfort. That's just how things were. She was shaping the dough into loaves when the kitchen door swung open. Emma. Her father's voice was tight. Come here. Her heart dropped. She never got called to the parlor during important visits. Something was wrong. She wiped her hands on her apron and followed him, her mind racing through possibilities. Had she done something to embarrass them? Left something out of place? Burned one of the pies? The parlor fell silent when she entered. Her mother sat rigid on the settee, her face pale. Lydia stood by the window, looking confused and slightly offended. And Wyatt Brooks stood in the center of the room, his hat in his hands, watching Emma with an expression she couldn't read. Mr. Brooks has made a request, her father said slowly. His jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. He'd like to speak with you. Emma blinked. With me? Privately, Wyatt said. His voice was deep and quiet, not aggressive, but firm. If that's acceptable. Her father looked like he'd swallowed glass. Of course. Of course. Emma, take Mr. Brooks to the garden. Emma's mind went blank. This didn't make sense. None of this made sense. She led Wyatt through the back door and into the garden, her heart hammering against her ribs. Behind them, she heard her mother's voice rise in a sharp whisper and Lydia's responding protest. The garden was Emma's one refuge, a patch of vegetables and herbs she maintained because they needed maintaining, but she'd snuck in a few flowers, too. Wildflowers, mostly. Things that grew tough and didn't need much care. Wyatt stopped by the tomato plants, looking around with what seemed like genuine interest. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd thought, maybe 30, not much older than her 24, and his eyes were gray, the color of storm clouds. You keep this garden? He asked. Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. It's good work. He touched one of the tomato plants, checking the leaves the way someone who actually knew plants would. Healthy, well-tended. Thank you. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. He turned to face her fully, and Emma found herself looking at the ground, at her flower-stained dress, at anything but those steady gray eyes. Look at me, he said quietly. She forced herself to lift her chin. I came here today to meet your sister, Wyatt said. Your father spoke very highly of her, said she was accomplished, refined, everything a man could want in a wife. Emma's throat tightened. She didn't know why he was telling her this. And she is all those things, Wyatt continued. Beautiful, too. I'm sure she'd make someone very happy. Then, but I'm not looking for someone to make me happy, he said, and there was something almost weary in his tone. I'm looking for someone who can survive what I'm about to offer. Emma frowned, confused. Wyatt set his hat on the garden bench and ran a hand through his dark hair. For the first time, he looked uncertain, less like a man with all the power and more like someone carrying a weight he couldn't put down. My ranch is big, he said, biggest in the territory. But it's also brutal. The work never stops. The weather's merciless. The land fights you every day, and if you're weak, it breaks you. He paused. My mother broke. The words hung between them. She came from society, from comfort. My father courted her with promises of adventure and romance, and she believed him. But ranch life isn't romantic. It's hard and lonely and relentless. She lasted 5 years before she left, took the train back east, and never looked back. Emma's hands twisted in her apron. She didn't know what to say. I watched my father turn bitter after that, Wyatt continued. Watched him become hard. He swore he'd never make that mistake again, never marry someone who couldn't handle the reality of ranch life. And when he told me it was time to marry, time to secure the family line, he made me promise the same thing. He looked at Emma then, really looked at her. I watched you this morning, he said, through the kitchen window. You were working before the sun came up, hauling water, scrubbing pots, moving like someone who's been doing hard labor their whole life. Your hands are calloused, your dress is mended. You don't carry yourself like a lady. You carry yourself like a worker. Emma felt heat crawl up her neck. She wanted to be offended, but she couldn't. Everything he said was true. I asked your father about you, Wyatt continued. He said you were practical, strong, that you could handle yourself. He didn't mean it as a compliment. I could tell, but it's exactly what I need. Understanding crashed over Emma like cold water. You want to marry me, she said flatly. I want to offer you a choice, Wyatt corrected. Come to the ranch as my wife. It won't be easy. My father will resist. He has his own ideas about what kind of woman I should marry. The work will be harder than anything you've done here, and you'll be leaving everything you know. I don't know anything else, Emma heard herself say. Just work. Something shifted in Wyatt's expression. Then you'll understand the terms. I need a partner, not a decoration. Someone who can stand beside me, not behind me. Someone who won't run when things get hard. He stepped closer, and Emma forced herself not to back away. In exchange, he said, you'll have security, protection, a share in everything I build. You won't be invisible anymore, Emma. You won't be the forgotten daughter doing thankless work while everyone else lives the life you made possible. Her breath caught. How did you... Because I saw it, Wyatt said simply. The way your father looks through you. The way your sister takes and doesn't thank. The way your mother gives you orders like your hired help, not her daughter. I saw it all in about 10 minutes, and I recognized it. Recognized what? What it looks like when someone's been used up and called worthless for it. Emma's eyes burned, but she blinked hard, refusing to cry. Not here. Not in front of this stranger who somehow saw more in 10 minutes than her family had in 24 years. I can't promise you'll be happy, Wyatt said, but I can promise you'll be valued. Your work will matter. Your voice will matter. You'll build something real instead of maintaining someone else's comfort. He picked up his hat and settled it back on his head. Think about it. I'll wait in the parlor for your answer. He walked away, leaving Emma standing alone among her tomato plants, her world tilting on its axis. She should say no. Of course she should say no. This was insane, marrying a stranger, leaving for a brutal ranch life, walking away from her family. Even if they didn't appreciate her, they were still her family. This was still her home. Except it wasn't. Not really. Home was supposed to be where you mattered, where you belonged. Emma had never belonged here. She'd been tolerated, used, kept around because someone had to do the work nobody else wanted. And Lydia would be fine. She was always fine. She'd find another wealthy match, maybe even a better one. Their parents' financial problems weren't Emma's responsibility to fix by erasing herself. Emma looked down at her hands. Cracked, stained, permanent evidence of a life spent serving. You won't be invisible anymore. She walked back into the house. The parlor was frozen like a tableau. Her father stood by the fireplace, jaw set. Her mother perched on the edge of the settee, hands clasped so tight her knuckles were white. Lydia had tears on her cheeks, actual tears, like this was somehow a tragedy happening to her. Wyatt stood apart from them all, waiting. Emma's father spoke first. "Emma, Mr. Brooks has explained his interest. Obviously, this is highly unusual, unexpected. I've tried to explain to him that Lydia—" "I accept," Emma said. The room went silent. Her father's face turned red. "You accept? You don't even know what you're accepting." "I accept his proposal," Emma said, louder this time, looking at Wyatt. "I'll marry you." "Emma, no!" Lydia stepped forward, her beautiful dress rustling. "You can't. This doesn't make sense. He came here for me." "He came here looking for a wife," Emma said, her voice steadier than she felt. "He chose. I'm choosing too." Her mother made a strangled sound. "Thomas, do something!" "Emma." Her father's voice dropped to that dangerous quiet that usually preceded punishment. "Step outside. We need to discuss this as a family." "No," Emma said. His eyes went wide. She'd never defied him directly before. Never. "What did you say?" "I said no." Emma's heart was racing, but she kept her chin up. "I'm 24 years old. I can make my own choice." "You ungrateful!" Her father crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. "After everything we've done for you." "Thomas." Wyatt's voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the tension like a blade. He hadn't moved, but something in his posture had shifted. "Let her go. This is my house, my daughter." And she's given her answer. Wyatt's gray eyes were hard now, all the earlier gentleness gone. "Let her go." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then her father released Emma's arm, shoving her away slightly. She stumbled but caught herself. "Fine," her father spat. "Take her. See how long she lasts when she realizes what she's given up. But don't come crawling back, Emma. You make this choice. You live with it." "I understand," Emma said quietly. Her mother was crying now, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, but Emma suspected it was more about the lost opportunity than losing a daughter. Lydia stood frozen, looking between Emma and Wyatt like she couldn't comprehend what was happening. "Can you ride?" Wyatt asked Emma. She nodded. She'd learned years ago, though the family only owned one old mare that mostly pulled their wagon. "Then get whatever you need. We leave in 20 minutes. Emma didn't have much to pack. She went to her tiny room, barely bigger than a closet, and pulled out a worn carpet bag. 2 dresses, 1 nightgown, a hairbrush, a small wooden box that had belonged to her grandmother, containing nothing valuable but memories. That was it. 24 years of life fit in one small bag. She changed into her better dress, the gray one, and braided her hair properly. Her hands shook slightly as she tied it off. When she came back downstairs, her father was nowhere to be seen. Her mother sat on the settee, stone-faced. Lydia stood by the window, arms crossed. "Emma," Lydia said softly, "please, think about this." "I have." "But you don't love him. You don't even know him." Emma looked at her sister, beautiful, sheltered, loved Lydia, and felt a wave of something too complicated to name. "No," Emma agreed, "but he sees me. That's more than anyone here has done in years." Lydia flinched. Wyatt appeared in the doorway. "Ready?" Emma nodded. He took her bag and led her outside where 2 horses waited. His was a large black gelding, powerful and well-trained. Next to it stood a bay mare with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor. "This is Rosie," Wyatt said, patting the mare's neck. "She's yours now." Emma's throat tightened. She'd never owned a horse, never owned anything that mattered. Wyatt helped her mount, his hands steady and impersonal. Then he swung onto his own horse with practiced ease. They were about to leave when the front door banged open. Emma's father stood on the porch, his face twisted with rage. "You think you're special now? Think you've won something?" Emma didn't answer. "You're nothing," he shouted. "You hear me? Nothing. All those years you worked here, you think that made you valuable. You were just free labor, the only thing you were good for, and now you're throwing it away for some rancher who'll realize his mistake in a month." Wyatt's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. He just looked at Emma, waiting to see what she'd do. Emma met her father's eyes, really met them, maybe for the first time in her life. You're right, she said quietly. I was free labor, but I'm not free anymore. She turned Rosie away from the house, away from the only life she'd ever known, and rode toward the horizon with a stranger who'd seen her worth in the calluses on her hands. Behind them, her father's curses faded into distance. Emma didn't look back. They rode in silence for the first hour. Emma focused on staying balanced in the saddle, on the rhythm of Rosie's gait, on anything except the enormity of what she'd just done. The land gradually changed as they traveled. The cultivated fields and familiar roads gave way to wilder territory. Rolling hills covered in prairie grass, clusters of trees following water sources, sky so big it seemed to swallow everything. We'll stop soon, Wyatt said finally. There's a creek about a mile ahead. Let the horses rest. Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. The creek was exactly where he said it would be, cutting through a small ravine shaded by cottonwoods. Wyatt dismounted and helped Emma down, then led both horses to drink. Emma stood awkwardly, unsure what to do with herself. Her legs ached from riding, and her mind was spinning with delayed shock. You should eat something, Wyatt said, pulling supplies from his saddlebag. He handed her some jerky and hardtack. It's not fancy, but it'll keep you going. She took it mechanically, forcing herself to chew and swallow, even though she wasn't hungry. Wyatt sat on a fallen log, watching the horses. After a moment, Emma joined him, keeping a respectful distance. Thank you, she said quietly. He glanced at her. For what? For seeing me. For the choice. Wyatt was quiet for a long moment. My mother used to say that the cruelest thing you can do to a person is make them disappear while they're still standing right in front of you. Emma's eyes burned again. I meant what I said back there, Wyatt continued. The ranch is hard. My father is harder. He's going to fight this. He had someone else in mind, a neighboring rancher's daughter, someone with connections and money. He's going to see you as an insult. Then why choose me? Because I'm tired of doing what he wants. Wyatt's voice was flat. And because I think you're stronger than anyone he would have picked. You just haven't had the chance to prove it yet. He stood, brushing off his pants. We should keep moving. We'll reach the ranch by nightfall. They rode on. As the sun lowered toward the horizon, Emma saw it, the Brooks Ranch. It sprawled across the valley like a small kingdom. Buildings clustered around a main house, corrals and barns spreading out in organized chaos. Cattle dotted the hills, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. It was overwhelming. That's home, Wyatt said, and for the first time she heard something like uncertainty in his voice. They approached through the main gate, and Emma saw ranch hands working, mending fences, moving cattle, cleaning equipment. A few looked up as they passed, their expressions curious but guarded. The main house was bigger than Emma's entire family home. 2 stories, solid construction, built to last. Light glowed in the windows. Wyatt dismounted and called out. A young man emerged from the barn, maybe 18, with the same dark hair and gray eyes. Lucas, Wyatt said. Take care of the horses. This is Emma. She'll be staying. Lucas's eyes went wide, but he nodded and took the reins without comment. Wyatt led Emma to the front door, then paused. My father's inside. Just stay quiet. Let me handle this. Emma's stomach knotted, but she nodded. The door swung open before Wyatt could touch it. A man stood in the doorway, older, graying, but with Wyatt's same height and build. His face was hard, carved from years of sun and authority. Nathaniel Brooks. His eyes swept over Emma with cold assessment, and she felt herself shrink automatically, all her earlier courage evaporating under that gaze. Who's this? Nathaniel asked. My wife, Wyatt said. Or she will be. We're getting married tomorrow. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. No, Nathaniel said flatly. You're not. It's done, Father. I said no! Nathaniel's voice cracked like thunder. I sent you to choose a bride, not pick up a field worker. Look at her, she's nobody. Nothing. Where's her family? Her name? Her dowry? She doesn't need those things. You're damn right she doesn't need them, because she's not staying. Nathaniel stepped forward, jabbing a finger at Emma. You think you can just walk into my house? My ranch? You think you're worthy of the Brooks name? Emma wanted to speak, to defend herself, but fear locked her throat. This was worse than her father. This was power and fury combined, aimed directly at her. That's enough. Wyatt said, his voice dangerously quiet. It's not nearly enough. Nathaniel turned on his son. I told you what we needed. An alliance with the Harrises. Their daughter would bring land, connections, investors. She's educated, refined. She's also terrified of horses, can't cook, and nearly fainted when I told her about calving season, Wyatt interrupted. Emma is strong. She's capable. She can do the work. The work? Nathaniel laughed, harsh and mocking. You think I built this empire so my daughter-in-law could do work? You're choosing a ranch hand over a lady because of work? I'm choosing a partner over an ornament. Father and son stared at each other, and Emma saw the depth of the gulf between them. Years of conflict compressed into this single moment. If you do this, Nathaniel said slowly, you'll regret it. She'll fail. She'll break. And when she does, don't expect me to clean up your mess. I won't need you to. Nathaniel's jaw worked. Then he looked at Emma one more time, and she saw it. Not just disapproval, but contempt. She was beneath notice. An embarrassment. Fine, he said, but she doesn't get the main house. Put her in the workers' quarters until you come to your senses. He turned and strode away, his footsteps echoing through the house. Emma stood frozen, humiliation burning through her chest. She'd known this would be hard, but she hadn't expected to feel so small, so worthless, within minutes of arriving. Wyatt exhaled slowly. I'm sorry. Is he right? Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Am I going to fail? Wyatt looked at her and his expression was unreadable. That depends. On what? On whether you're strong enough to prove him wrong. He picked up her bag and led her out the back of the house, toward a smaller building set apart from the main structure. The workers' quarters. Simple, functional, clean, but sparse. You can stay here tonight, Wyatt said. Tomorrow we'll marry, and then we'll figure out the rest. He left her alone in the small room with a narrow bed and a single window. Emma sat down slowly, her legs finally giving out. She'd left one prison for another, traded one family's contempt for a stranger's doubt and a father-in-law's hatred. But as she sat there in the gathering darkness, something stubborn hardened in her chest. Nathaniel Brooks thought she would fail. Her own father thought she was nothing. Emma had spent her entire life being underestimated. Maybe it was time to prove them all wrong. She lay back on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, and didn't let herself cry. Tomorrow, she would start building the life she'd chosen. Tonight, she just had to survive. Emma woke to the sound of bells clanging in the pre-dawn darkness. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Then it came back in a rush, the ranch, Nathaniel's contempt, the narrow bed in the workers' quarters, her wedding day. She sat up, every muscle protesting. The ride yesterday had been longer than anything she was used to, and her body was making her pay for it. Outside, she could hear voices, boots on hard-packed earth, the ranch coming to life. Someone knocked on the door. It's Lucas, came the young voice. Wyatt says to come to the main house when you're ready. There's water for washing in the basin. Emma dressed quickly in her gray dress, the only decent one she had. She splashed water on her face, braided her hair, and tried not to think about what Lydia's wedding would have looked like. Flowers, music, a white dress that cost more than Emma had earned in her lifetime. This wasn't that kind of wedding. The main house was quiet when she entered through the back door. A woman stood at the stove, middle-aged and sturdy, with graying hair tied back in a practical bun. She looked up when Emma entered, her eyes sharp and assessing. You're the girl, then, she said, not unkind, but not warm either. Yes, ma'am. I'm Emma. Margaret. I cook and manage the house. She turned back to the stove. Mr. Nathaniel's in his office. Wyatt's waiting in the front room. There's coffee if you want it. Emma poured herself a cup with shaking hands. The coffee was strong and bitter, nothing like the careful blend her mother used to serve to guests. She found Wyatt standing by the window, dressed in clean clothes but still looking like a rancher, not a groom. He turned when she entered. How did you sleep? Fine, Emma lied. He studied her face, and she had the uncomfortable feeling he knew exactly how she'd spent the night, staring at the ceiling, second-guessing every choice. The minister will be here within the hour, Wyatt said. It'll be quick, just the paperwork and vows. My father won't attend. Emma nodded, not trusting herself to speak. After that, we work, Wyatt continued. I won't throw you into the deep end, but I need you to understand, Everyone here earns their keep. Even my father still works the ranch every day. You'll be expected to do the same. I can work. I know you can. But this isn't farm work, Emma. It's ranching. Different skills, different dangers. You'll need to learn fast. The minister arrived exactly when Wyatt said he would. A thin man with kind eyes who didn't ask questions about the bride's simple dress or the groom's stern expression. He performed the ceremony in the front room with Margaret and Lucas as witnesses. Emma repeated words she barely heard, her mind numb. Wyatt's hand was calloused and warm when he slipped a simple gold band on her finger. When the minister said he could kiss the bride, Wyatt leaned in and pressed his lips to her forehead instead, brief and impersonal. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Brooks," the minister said. Mrs. Brooks. The name felt foreign, like a costume that didn't fit. They signed the papers, the minister left. Margaret returned to the kitchen without comment. Lucas shuffled his feet awkwardly, then disappeared back outside. And just like that, Emma was married. "Change into work clothes," Wyatt said. "Meet me at the north barn in 20 minutes. He walked out, leaving Emma standing alone in the parlor of a house that was supposedly now hers but felt like enemy territory. She changed into her brown dress, the one that had seen countless hours of farm work. It felt more honest than the gray one. More like herself. The north barn was massive, 3 times the size of her family's entire property. Inside, the smell of hay and animals was overwhelming. Ranch hands moved with practiced efficiency, pitching hay, checking equipment, discussing the day's work in low voices that stopped when Emma entered. She felt their eyes on her, weighing, judging. Wyatt stood near the back, talking to a grizzled man with a weather-beaten face and hands like leather. "This is Hank," Wyatt said when Emma approached. "He's the foreman. Been running operations here since before I was born." Hank looked Emma up and down, his expression carefully neutral. "Ma'am?" "Hank's going to show you the ranch," Wyatt continued. "You need to know the layout, understand how things work, pay attention, ask questions. Don't pretend you know something if you don't." "Yes, sir," Emma said, then caught herself. "I mean, sir is fine," Wyatt said. "When we're working, I'm the boss. That goes for everyone, including you." He left to deal with something at the far end of the barn. Hank gestured for Emma to follow. "You ever work cattle?" he asked as they walked. "No, sir, just crops and chickens," he grunted. "Different animal entirely. Cattle are bigger, meaner, and stupider. They'll hurt you without meaning to, and they'll definitely hurt you if they do mean to." He showed her the corrals, explained the different sections, breeding stock, calves, animals being prepared for market. He pointed out the bulls, massive and dangerous, kept separate from the main herd. "Never turn your back on a bull," Hank said. "Never assume a fence will hold if one decides it won't. And never, ever think you can outrun one. You can't." Emma absorbed it all, her mind working to categorize and remember. The ranch was a complex operation, dozens of moving parts that had to work in harmony. Feed schedules, water sources, breeding rotations, health checks, market timing. "How many head do you run?" she asked. "About 1,500 right now, more during calving season." Emma tried to imagine managing that many animals and failed. They walked the property for hours. Hank showed her the equipment sheds, the feed storage, the areas where different types of work happened. He introduced her to a few of the hands, men who nodded politely but kept their distance. "They're waiting to see if you'll last," Hank said bluntly when they were alone again. "Most don't, especially—" He trailed off. "Especially women who marry into the family," Emma finished. "Especially anyone who didn't grow up ranching. It's not personal. They've just seen it before." "Wyatt's mother." Hank's expression tightened. "That wasn't my story to tell." "But it's true." He was quiet for a moment. "Mrs. Brooks, the first Mrs. Brooks, she tried. I'll give her that. But she wasn't built for this life. Too soft. Too used to comfort. After she left, Mr. Nathaniel swore he'd never let that happen again. Said the next woman to marry into this family would have to prove herself first. And now Wyatt brought me here without asking permission. Now you're in the middle of a war you didn't start," Hank said. "Best thing you can do is keep your head down and do the work. Let your actions speak." They returned to the main compound as the sun reached its peak. Emma's legs ached, her head spun with information, and she was desperately thirsty. Margaret was setting out lunch in the main house. Simple fare, stew, and bread, enough to feed the family and the hands who lived on the property. Emma moved to help, automatically reaching for plates. "What are you doing?" Margaret asked. Emma froze. "Helping? Your family now. You eat at the table." "I can still help." Margaret's expression softened slightly. "Suit yourself, but don't expect special treatment. You help, you do it right." They worked in silence, Emma falling into the familiar rhythm of serving a meal. When the men filed in, they filled the long table, ranch hands on one end, Wyatt and Lucas near the middle, and one chair at the head that remained empty. Nathaniel didn't come to lunch. Emma sat next to Wyatt, acutely aware of the curious glances from the hands. They ate quickly, efficiently, already thinking about the afternoon's work. "Emma's going to start helping with daily operations," Wyatt announced to the table. "She'll be learning as she goes. I expect everyone to treat her the same as any new hand. Show her what she needs to know, but don't coddle her." A few nods around the table. No one questioned it out loud, but Emma could feel the skepticism. After lunch, Wyatt took her to the corrals. "Can you rope?" he asked. "A little. I've tied down tarps and secured loads." "Not the same." He grabbed a coiled lariat from a fence post and demonstrated, the loop sailing out and settling over a fence post 20 feet away. He made it look effortless. He handed her the rope. "Try it." Emma's first attempt fell short. Her second tangled. Her third hit the post but didn't settle properly. "Again," Wyatt said. She tried for an hour, her arms burning, sweat soaking through her dress despite the cool air. By the end, she could hit the post about half the time, but her loops were sloppy and would never hold a moving animal. "It's a start," Wyatt said, which felt like faint praise. "Tomorrow, we'll work on it with actual cattle." That evening, Emma helped Margaret clean up after dinner, another meal Nathaniel didn't attend. Her hands moved automatically through the familiar motions of washing dishes, but her mind was elsewhere. "You did better than I expected today," Margaret said, breaking the silence. Emma looked up, surprised. "I've seen a lot of women come through here," Margaret continued. "Visitors, potential brides for Wyatt, even a few for Lucas when they get ideas. Most of them last about 2 hours before they start making excuses. You lasted all day and didn't complain once." "I'm used to working." "There's working, and then there's ranch working. They're not the same thing." Margaret dried a plate slowly. "But you might have a chance if you can handle what comes next." "What comes next?" Margaret glanced toward the door, making sure they were alone. "Mr. Nathaniel's not done fighting this marriage. He's waiting for you to fail so he can prove Wyatt wrong. And if you don't fail fast enough on your own, he'll help the process along." Emma's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you should watch your back. Not all accidents on a ranch are accidents." Before Emma could respond, Wyatt appeared in the doorway. "Emma, we need to talk." She followed him out to the front porch, where the setting sun painted the valley in shades of orange and red. It would have been beautiful if her heart wasn't hammering. "My father wants to meet with you tomorrow morning," Wyatt said. "Just the two of you." "Why?" "To test you, to try and convince you to leave. Maybe both." He turned to face her. "You don't have to go if you don't want to. I can tell him—" "No," Emma interrupted. "I'll go." Wyatt studied her face. "He's going to try to break you down. Make you feel worthless. It's what he does." "I'm familiar with the technique." Something flickered in Wyatt's eyes. Recognition. Maybe respect. "Don't let him bully you, but don't challenge him directly either. He has all the power here, and he knows it." "Then what should I do?" "Survive it," Wyatt said simply. "Just survive." That night, Emma lay in her narrow bed, still in the workers' quarters, not moved to the main house, and tried to prepare herself. But how did you prepare for someone determined to destroy you? Morning came too fast. Emma dressed in her brown work dress and braided her hair with fingers that trembled slightly. She made her way to the main house, where Margaret pointed silently toward Nathaniel's office. The door was open. Nathaniel sat behind a massive oak desk, papers spread before him, looking every inch the empire builder. He didn't look up when Emma entered. "Close the door," he said. She did. "Sit." There was only one chair facing the desk, positioned slightly lower so anyone sitting would have to look up at him. Emma sat, keeping her spine straight. Nathaniel finally looked at her, his gray eyes, so like Wyatt's but colder, assessing her like livestock. Do you know why you're here? He asked. To talk. To give you a chance to leave with some dignity intact. He leaned back in his chair. My son made a mistake. He was thinking with sentiment instead of strategy. But I'm a practical man. I'm willing to offer you compensation to annul this marriage and return to your family. Emma's hands tightened in her lap. I'm not interested in compensation. You haven't heard the amount. It doesn't matter. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. Everyone has a price. Not for this. He stood abruptly, moving around the desk to lean against the front of it, looming over her. The intimidation was deliberate. Let me tell you what's going to happen, he said, his voice dropping. You're going to work yourself to exhaustion trying to prove you belong here. You're going to fail at tasks that should be simple. The men will lose respect for you. Wyatt will start to see you as a burden instead of a partner. And within 3 months, maybe 6 if you're stubborn, you'll realize you made a terrible mistake. Emma forced herself to meet his eyes. And if I don't, then you'll get hurt. This ranch is dangerous, girl. People die here. Animals kill them. Equipment crushes them. Weather takes them. And that's without any help from me. The threat was clear, barely veiled. Are you threatening to hurt me? Emma asked, her voice steadier than she felt. I'm stating facts. Accidents happen, especially to people who don't know what they're doing. He straightened, walking back around the desk. But it doesn't have to be that way. Leave now, and I'll make sure you're set up comfortably somewhere else. A small house in town, maybe. An allowance. You could have an easier life than anything you've known. For just a moment, Emma was tempted. Not by the money, but by the escape. She could feel the weight of Nathaniel's hostility, the ranch's indifference, the massive gap between what she knew and what she needed to know. But then she remembered her father's face when he called her worthless. Remembered Lydia's tears that were really about herself. Remembered standing in her family's parlor, invisible and used up. I'm staying, Emma said. Nathaniel's expression hardened. Then you're a fool. Maybe, but I'm Wyatt's fool now, not yours. Something dangerous flashed in Nathaniel's eyes. Get out! Emma stood on shaking legs and walked to the door. Emma? Nathaniel said, stopping her. She turned. When you fail, and you will fail, don't expect sympathy. You made your choice. So did you, Emma said quietly, and left before he could respond. She made it outside before her legs gave out. She sat on the porch steps, breathing hard, trying to stop shaking. That bad? She looked up to find Lucas watching her, concern on his young face. He wants me gone, Emma said. Yeah, he usually gets what he wants. Lucas sat down next to her. But Wyatt's stubborn too, runs in the family. Am I going to survive this? Lucas was quiet for a moment. My mother didn't, but she was different. She fought against the ranch instead of learning from it. She wanted to change everything instead of understanding it first. Is that what I should do? Just accept everything? No. But pick your battles. Prove you can do the work before you try to change how it's done. It was surprisingly wise advice from someone so young. Lucas! Hank's voice called from the barn. We're moving the herd. Lucas stood. You should watch. It's impressive the first time. Emma followed him to the northern pasture, where dozens of cattle were being gathered by mounted riders. The coordination was remarkable, each rider knowing exactly where to position themselves, how to move the animals without spooking them, when to press forward and when to hold back. Wyatt was in the middle of it, sitting his horse like he'd been born there, reading the herd's movement like a language Emma didn't speak. We're rotating pastures, Hank explained, appearing beside her. Keep them moving so they don't overgraze. It's constant management. Emma watched, fascinated despite herself. This was ranching, not the individual tasks Hank had shown her yesterday, but the whole operation in motion. It was complex and dangerous and required skills she didn't have. But she could learn. One of the younger hands, a kid maybe 16, lost control of his section. Cattle broke away, heading toward a gully that would scatter them. Wyatt wheeled his horse and cut them off, turning them back with practiced precision. That's what 20 years of experience looks like, Hank said. You don't learn that in a day or a week. You earn it through mistakes and pain and cattle stepping on your foot enough times that you learn to move faster. How long did it take you to get good? Emma asked. Hank snorted. I'm 63. Ask me again in 10 years. The herd settled into the new pasture, and the riders dispersed to other tasks. Wyatt rode over, his horse breathing hard from the work. How did it go with my father? He asked Emma. He offered me money to leave. Wyatt's jaw tightened. And? I told him I'm staying. Something shifted in Wyatt's expression. Approval, maybe, or at least acknowledgement. Then you better learn to ride better than you do now. Hank, get her a saddle. She's going out with the fence crew this afternoon. Hank raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Yes, sir. Emma spent the afternoon riding the fence line with 3 ranch hands who spoke maybe 10 words to her total. They were checking for breaks, making small repairs, marking areas that needed major work. It was hot, dusty, mind-numbing labor that required constant attention because one missed break could mean lost cattle. Her inexperience showed immediately. She couldn't spot problems as fast as the others, her repairs were clumsy, and she nearly fell off her horse twice navigating rough terrain. But she didn't complain, didn't ask for breaks, didn't expect special treatment. By sunset, when they returned to the barn, every muscle in her body screamed. One of the hands, a taciturn man named Jake, gave her a brief nod as he dismounted. It wasn't much, but it was something. Over the next 2 weeks, Emma threw herself into learning. She woke before dawn and worked until dark. Hank or one of the hands taught her bits and pieces. How to check cattle for illness, how to mix feed, how to read weather signs, how to handle basic veterinary work. She was terrible at most of it. Her roping improved marginally, but she still couldn't hit a moving target. Her riding got better through sheer repetition, though she accumulated bruises from getting thrown or knocked against fence posts. Her hands, already calloused, developed new layers of toughness from work she'd never done before. The ranch hands remained distant, but not actively hostile. They were waiting, she realized, waiting to see if she'd quit. Nathaniel, true to his word, gave her no sympathy. He watched her struggle with cold satisfaction, waiting for the inevitable failure. And then came the first real test. Emma was in the barn, cleaning tack, when one of the hands burst through the door. "Where's Wyatt?" "North pasture," Emma said. "What's wrong?" "Breech birth. First-time mother having trouble. We need him now." "I'll get him," Emma said, already moving. "You can't ride fast enough, just—" But Emma was already running for Rosie. She mounted clumsily and kicked the mare into a gallop, ignoring the protests from her body. She found Wyatt with the breeding stock, spotted him from a distance, and pushed Rosie harder than she should have. The mare responded, eating up the ground. "Breech birth," Emma gasped when she reached him. "Barn 3. Wyatt didn't waste time with questions. He wheeled his horse and took off, Emma struggling to keep up. At the barn, they found a young cow in obvious distress, 2 hands trying to help but clearly overwhelmed. The calf was positioned wrong, and the mother was exhausting herself trying to push. Wyatt assessed the situation in seconds. "We need to turn it. Jake, hold her head. Emma, get in here." "Me?" "You're the smallest. You'll be able to reach better than I can." Emma's stomach lurched, but she dismounted and rolled up her sleeves. Wyatt talked her through it. How to reach in, how to find the calf's legs, how to reposition carefully without hurting either animal. It was disgusting and terrifying and required her to push past every instinct that screamed this was beyond her capability. Her hands found the calf's front legs, tangled wrong. She worked carefully, sweat dripping into her eyes, the cow's distress making everything harder. "That's it," Wyatt said. "Now pull when she pushes." "Steady." Emma pulled. The calf moved slightly. Not enough. "Again," Wyatt commanded. She braced herself and pulled harder. Something shifted. The calf's position changed. "Good. Keep going." It took 20 minutes that felt like hours. Emma's arms burned, her back screamed, her hands were slick with blood and fluid. But slowly, impossibly, the calf came free. It hit the ground in a wet heap and lay still. Emma's heart sank. They were too late. Then Wyatt was there clearing the calf's airways, rubbing it vigorously with straw. For long seconds, nothing happened. Then the calf coughed, gasped, drew a shuddering breath. The mother cow, exhausted but alive, turned to nose her baby. Emma sat back on the barn floor, shaking, covered in blood, and worse. "You did good," Wyatt said quietly. Jake, the taciturn hand who'd given her that first nod, looked at her with something like respect. "Real good." Word spread fast. By dinner, the whole ranch knew Emma had helped save a breech birth on her 3rd week. It wasn't impressive by ranch standards. It was the kind of thing that happened regularly, but it mattered because she hadn't hesitated, hadn't claimed she couldn't do it, had just done the work. At dinner that night, one of the hands nodded to her as she sat down. Then another. Small gestures, but significant ones. Nathaniel, at the head of the table for the first time since her arrival, watched it all with narrowed eyes. After dinner, as Emma helped Margaret clean up, the older woman smiled. "You might actually make it," Margaret said. Emma didn't have time to respond before Wyatt appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "Your family's here," he said. Emma's blood ran cold. "What?" "Your father and sister, they're in the front parlor. They're demanding to see you." Emma's hands were still stained from the calf birth when she walked into the parlor. She hadn't had time to clean up properly, and the smell of barn clung to her dress. Somehow, that felt appropriate. Her father stood by the fireplace like he owned the place, wearing his Sunday clothes and the expression he used when negotiating crop prices. Confident, superior, ready to win. Lydia sat on the settee, her traveling dress pristine, her hands folded delicately in her lap. They both stared when Emma entered. "My God, Emma," Lydia said, her nose wrinkling. "What happened to you?" "I was working." Emma stayed near the door, aware of Wyatt standing just behind her. A silent presence, but there. Her father's eyes swept over her, and she saw disgust flash across his face. "This is what you've become? You look like a stable hand." "I am a stable hand, among other things. Don't be smart with me." Thomas Whitmore stepped forward, his voice hardening. "We've come a long way to talk sense into you. The least you can do is show some gratitude." Emma felt something cold settle in her chest. "I didn't ask you to come." "Of course you didn't. You've been too proud to admit you made a mistake." He gestured around the room at the solid furniture and expensive fixtures. "All of this, and they've got you living like hired help. Is this what you wanted? Is this better than home?" "Yes," Emma said simply. The word hung in the air like a slap. Lydia stood quickly. "Emma, please, just listen. Things have been difficult since you left. Father's had trouble with the farm, and Mother's been ill with worry." "Your mother has been ill because her plan failed," Emma interrupted, looking at her father. "You needed Lydia to marry money to save the farm. I ruined that. And now you're here to bring me back so I can work for free while you figure out another solution." Her father's face went red. "How dare you, Mr. Whitmore?" Wyatt's voice cut through the rising tension. "You're a guest in my home. Keep your voice down." Thomas turned on him, fury radiating from every line of his body. "This is your fault. You filled her head with ideas, made her think she was worth something." "She is worth something," Wyatt said quietly, but there was steel underneath. "More than you ever gave her credit for." "She's my daughter. Then you should have treated her like one." The silence that followed was vicious. Lydia broke it, her voice small and desperate. "Emma, please just come home, even if it's just for a visit. Let's talk about this properly. You can't just throw away your family." "I didn't throw you away," Emma said, and was surprised by how calm she sounded. "You threw me away years ago. You just didn't notice because I was still there, doing the work nobody else wanted to do." "That's not fair," Lydia whispered. "Isn't it?" Emma looked at her sister, beautiful, fragile Lydia who'd never scrubbed a floor or mended a fence or gone to bed with hands bleeding from lye soap. "Tell me one thing you know about me, Lydia. One thing that isn't about what I can do for you." Lydia opened her mouth, closed it, her eyes filled with tears. "That's what I thought." "You selfish, ungrateful!" Thomas started toward Emma, his hand raised, and suddenly Wyatt was between them, his stance making it very clear what would happen if Thomas took another step. "You need to leave," Wyatt said. "Now." "She's coming with us," Thomas snarled. "No," Emma said from behind Wyatt. "I'm not. You owe us. After everything we've done for you, fed you, clothed you, gave you a roof over your head, I earned all of that." Emma's voice rose despite herself. "I worked for every meal, every piece of clothing, every night I slept under your roof. You didn't give me anything. I paid for it with years of my life." Thomas's face twisted into something ugly. "Fine. Keep your ranch marriage. But don't come crawling back when he realizes what a mistake he made. Don't expect any help from us when this all falls apart." "I won't," Emma said. "I never expected help from you anyway." He grabbed Lydia's arm, yanking her toward the door. Lydia looked back at Emma, her face crumpling. "I'm sorry," Lydia said, and Emma couldn't tell if she was apologizing for their father or for herself or for everything that had led them to this moment. Then they were gone, the sound of their wagon fading into the distance. Emma stood frozen, her whole body shaking now that it was over. She felt Wyatt's hand on her shoulder, gentle but grounding. "You all right?" "I don't know." Emma's voice sounded strange to her own ears. "I thought it would feel different, cutting them off completely." "How does it feel?" She considered, "Like I can breathe for the first time in years, and like I just lost something I never really had to begin with." Wyatt squeezed her shoulder once, then let go. "Go clean up. Get some food. Tomorrow, we've got work to do." He left her alone in the parlor, and Emma was grateful for it. She didn't want comfort right now. She wanted to feel this, the strange, complicated grief of losing a family that had never really claimed her, but she didn't have long to process. Margaret appeared in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "There's hot water in the kitchen. Come on." Emma followed her, too exhausted to argue. Margaret had set up a basin and clean cloths, and she helped Emma wash the blood and grime from her hands, without comment. "Your mother really sick?" Margaret asked finally. "Probably not. My father lies when it suits him." "Most men do." Margaret handed her a clean towel. "You did the right thing sending them away. Family that treats you like free labor isn't family. It's just people who happen to share your blood." Emma looked at the older woman, surprised by the bitterness in her tone. "My family was the same," Margaret said. "That's why I'm here instead of there. Sometimes leaving is the only way to save yourself." That night, Emma lay in her narrow bed and stared at the ceiling, replaying the confrontation over and over. She kept thinking about Lydia's face, the confusion and hurt there, like she genuinely couldn't understand why Emma would choose this life over returning home. But Lydia had never understood. How could she? She'd been given everything Emma had been denied: love, attention, value. She'd been raised to believe she mattered, while Emma had been raised to believe she was useful. There was a difference. Emma was finally learning what it was. The next morning brought new challenges. A cattle buyer was coming to inspect the herd, which meant the ranch hands spent hours sorting the best animals, cleaning up the presentation areas, preparing for negotiation. Emma worked alongside them, doing whatever needed doing. Hank put her on fence repair in the inspection corrals. Simple work, but necessary. She was hammering in a loose post when Nathaniel appeared. "You're doing that wrong," he said. Emma looked up, startled. It was the first time he'd directly addressed her since their meeting in his office. "The angle's off. You'll waste a post that way." He wasn't wrong. Emma adjusted, feeling his eyes on her like a weight. "Your family came yesterday," Nathaniel said. "I heard." Emma kept working, not trusting herself to respond. "They wanted you back. You said no." "Yes, sir." "Why?" The question surprised her enough that she stopped hammering. "Because this is better." "Better than family?" "Better than being invisible while pretending to be part of one." Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. "You know what I think? I think you're stubborn and prideful, and you'll cling to this mistake until it destroys you rather than admit you were wrong." "Maybe," Emma said, "but it's my mistake to make. It's my son's mistake too, and this ranch's. Every minute he wastes protecting you is a minute he's not focused on what matters. Then stop making him protect me." Emma faced him fully, hammer still in hand. "Give me a real chance. Put me to work doing things that actually matter. If I fail, you win. If I succeed, everyone benefits. What are you afraid of?" Nathaniel's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You think you can challenge me, girl? I think you've already decided I'll fail, so you're not giving me a real test. You're just waiting for me to give up." Emma's heart hammered, but she held her ground. "That's not testing me. That's just being afraid you might be wrong." For a long moment, she thought he might explode. His face went hard, his jaw clenched, and she braced for the verbal assault. Instead, he smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "Fine," he said. "You want a real test? Tonight there's a dinner with investors, important men who might fund our expansion into the Northern Territory. These are people who expect refinement, intelligence, proper behavior. You'll attend. You'll participate in the conversation, and we'll see if you can handle being more than a field hand." Emma's stomach dropped. She knew what he was doing, setting her up to fail in front of people whose opinion mattered, whose money could make or break the ranch's future. "All right," she said. Nathaniel's smile widened. "Wear something appropriate. We can't have you showing up covered in manure." He walked away, leaving Emma gripping the hammer so hard her knuckles went white. She finished the fence repair in a daze, her mind racing. She didn't own appropriate clothing for a dinner with investors. She barely owned appropriate clothing for anything beyond work. And more than that, she didn't know how to act at those dinners, what to say, how to present herself as anything other than what she was. Margaret found her in the barn an hour later, still spiraling. "Heard about the dinner," the older woman said. "Nathaniel's playing dirty. I don't have anything to wear. I don't know what to say. I'm going to embarrass everyone." "Probably," Margaret agreed, which didn't help. "But you might surprise yourself. You're smarter than you think. You've just never had reason to show it. That's not... Come with me." Margaret led her to a storage room in the main house Emma had never entered. Inside were trunks and boxes, the accumulated possessions of years. Margaret opened one trunk and pulled out a dress. Dark blue, simple, but well made, clearly expensive. "This was the first Mrs. Brooks," Margaret said. "She left most of her things when she went back east. Never wanted them again. Nathaniel kept them stored away, wouldn't let anyone touch them." She held the dress up to Emma. "You're about the same size. It'll fit." "I can't." "You can, and you will." She would have wanted someone to get use out of it. Margaret's voice softened. "She wasn't a bad woman, Emma. Just wrong for this place. But she was kind, and she would have liked you." Emma took the dress with shaking hands. That evening, as the sun began to set, Emma stood in her small room staring at her reflection in the cracked mirror. The blue dress fit almost perfectly, and Margaret had helped her pin up her hair in a style that looked deliberate rather than hasty. She looked like a different person, like someone who might belong at a dinner with investors. But she didn't feel like that person. She felt like an imposter. "You look nice," Wyatt's voice came from the doorway, startling her. He leaned against the frame, cleaned up himself, wearing clothes that actually looked formal instead of functional. "Your father's trying to humiliate me," Emma said. "I know. He told me about it with this look on his face like he'd already won." Wyatt stepped into the room. "But here's the thing about my father. He's so convinced people will fail that he doesn't always see when they don't. I don't know how to talk to investors." "Then don't talk like you think they want. Talk like yourself. These men aren't idiots. They got rich by recognizing value when they see it. Show them you understand the ranch, the work, the reality of what we're building. That's worth more than polished manners. And if I fail, then we deal with it together." He offered his arm. "Come on, let's give them something to talk about." The dining room had been transformed. The long table was set with fine china Emma hadn't known the ranch owned. Candles provided warm light. 3 men in expensive suits sat talking with Nathaniel, their voices carrying the confidence of people used to being the most important in any room. They all looked up when Emma and Wyatt entered. Emma felt their assessment like a physical thing, taking in her dress, her face, her posture, judging whether she belonged here. Nathaniel made introductions with barely concealed smugness. "Gentlemen, my daughter-in-law, Emma Brooks. Emma, this is Mr. Harrison, Mr. Chen, and Mr. Blackwell. They're considering investing in our northern expansion." Emma shook hands with each of them, their grips testing her, seeing if she'd flinch. She didn't. "A pleasure," Mr. Harrison said, his southern accent thick. Nathaniel didn't mention Wyatt had married. "Recent development," Nathaniel said smoothly. "Very recent." They sat for dinner, Emma placed between Mr. Chen and Mr. Blackwell. Margaret and another woman Emma didn't know served the first course. Soup that smelled rich and complex. The conversation started safe. Weather, travel conditions, general pleasantries. Emma stayed quiet, watching, learning the rhythm of how these men talked, the pauses, the subtle challenges, the way they tested each other. Then Mr. Harrison turned to her directly. "So, Mrs. Brooks, how are you finding ranch life?" It was a trap question, Emma realized. If she said it was wonderful, she'd sound naive. If she said it was hard, she'd sound weak. "Educational," Emma said. "I'm learning that ranching is less about individual skills and more about understanding systems, how each piece affects the whole." Mr. Chen's eyebrow rose slightly. "Interesting observation. Most people focus on the romantic aspects, the open land, the cattle, the independence. Those things matter, Emma said, but they don't keep a ranch profitable. That takes infrastructure, labor management, market timing, risk assessment. She paused. At least that's what I'm learning. And what did you do before this? Mr. Blackwell asked. Farm work. Different scale, different challenges. But the principles are similar. You work with what you have, plan for what you need, and hope weather and market don't destroy you in between. Nathaniel was watching her with narrowed eyes, waiting for her to slip. The conversation continued through the main course. The men discussed the Northern Territory, virgin land, good water, potential for expansion, but also risk. The investment would be substantial, the return uncertain. The biggest challenge is labor, Mr. Harrison said. That territory is remote, hard to keep workers when they can find easier jobs closer to town. You need workers who understand they're building something, Emma said, then stopped, realizing she'd spoken without thinking. But Mr. Chen looked interested. Explain. Emma's mouth went dry, but Wyatt gave her a small nod. People leave when they feel like cogs in someone else's machine, she said. But if they have stake in the success, profit sharing, land grants after X years of service, decision-making power in their areas of expertise, they'll work harder and stay longer. You're not just buying their labor, you're buying their investment in the outcome. Mr. Blackwell leaned back, considering. That's not how most ranches operate. Most ranches lose workers constantly and spend fortunes on training replacements, Emma countered. Seems inefficient. It's also idealistic, Nathaniel interjected, his voice tight. Profit sharing cuts into margins. Workers need clear hierarchy, not decision-making power. Margins don't matter if you can't keep the operation running, Emma said, then realized she was directly contradicting her father-in-law in front of investors. Her stomach clenched, but Mr. Harrison was smiling. The girl's got a point, Nathaniel. We've seen the numbers on your worker turnover. It's costing you. Temporary growing pains, Nathaniel said stiffly. Or a structural problem with a potential solution sitting right here at your table, Mr. Chen said, looking at Emma with frank interest. Mrs. Brooks, have you shared these ideas with your husband? Emma glanced at Wyatt, who was watching the exchange with barely concealed surprise. We've discussed labor challenges, Emma said carefully. You should discuss solutions too, Mr. Blackwell said. I've invested in a dozen operations across 3 territories. The ones that succeed long-term aren't the ones with the most land or the biggest herds. They're the ones that figure out how to keep good people. The conversation shifted, but Emma felt Nathaniel's fury radiating across the table. She'd done exactly what he'd wanted to prevent. She'd impressed the investors. Worse, she'd done it by contradicting him. After dinner, the men retired to Nathaniel's office for whiskey and detailed numbers. Emma wasn't invited, which was fine. She needed air. She slipped out to the front porch, breathing hard, the adrenaline from the dinner finally hitting her. That was incredible. Wyatt's voice came from the darkness. He sat on the porch rail, barely visible in the shadows. Where did that come from? I don't know. I've been watching how the ranch operates, seeing where things work and where they don't. Emma leaned against a post. Did I overstep? Your father looked ready to murder me. He was. He is. Wyatt stood, walking over to her. But you were right about all of it. I've been thinking about the labor problem for months, but I didn't have a solution. You found one in 3 weeks. I probably ruined the investment. You saved it. I could see it in their faces. They were losing confidence in my father's plan. You gave them a reason to believe again. He paused. You gave me one too. Emma looked up at him, this man she'd married but barely knew, and saw something shift in his expression. Emma, I chose you because I thought you could survive here. But you're doing more than surviving. You're seeing things I've been too close to notice. He trailed off, searching for words. That matters. Before she could respond, the door opened. Mr. Chen stepped out. Mrs. Brooks, a moment? Emma's heart jumped. Wyatt squeezed her hand once, briefly, then stepped back to let her talk privately. Mr. Chen pulled out a cigar, lit it, the smoke curling in the night air. Your father-in-law is not pleased with you. I noticed. Good. That means you're paying attention. He took a long drag. I'm going to tell you something in confidence. This investment? It's contingent on more than just land and cattle. It's contingent on leadership. Nathaniel Brooks is a brilliant rancher, but he's old-fashioned, stubborn. He'll run this operation into the ground before he adapts to changing markets. I can't speak to... I'm not asking you to. I'm telling you that what you said in there about labor, about systems, about building something sustainable, that's the kind of thinking that will matter in 5 years, 10 years, 20. Not Nathaniel's iron fist approach. He tapped ash off his cigar. My investment is going to come with conditions. One of them is that Wyatt has more operational control. And if Wyatt's smart, which I think he is, he'll keep you involved in planning. Emma's mind raced. Mr. Chen, no need to respond. Just wanted you to know that tonight wasn't a failure, despite what Nathaniel will tell you. He smiled. You did well, Mrs. Brooks. Keep it up. He went back inside, leaving Emma standing alone with the implications of what he'd just said. The investment was happening because of her, despite Nathaniel's intentions. She'd won. Inside, through the window, she could see Nathaniel's face as Mr. Chen rejoined the group. Could see the moment the investor delivered whatever conditions he'd mentioned. Could see Nathaniel's expression go from confident to shocked to furious. Then his eyes found her through the window. Emma didn't look away, didn't flinch. This was her test, and she'd passed it. Not by being who Nathaniel wanted her to fail at being, but by being exactly who she was. Someone who saw problems and thought about solutions. Someone who'd spent her whole life making broken systems work better. The meeting broke up an hour later. The investors left with handshakes and promises to finalize paperwork within the week. Nathaniel saw them out with forced civility, then turned on Emma the moment they were gone. My office. Now. Emma followed him, Wyatt close behind. Nathaniel slammed the door. What the hell did you think you were doing? Answering questions, Emma said, her voice steadier than she felt. You contradicted me in front of investors, made me look like I don't know how to run my own ranch. You asked me to attend, to participate. That's what I did. I asked you to fail, Nathaniel roared. To embarrass yourself so thoroughly that Wyatt would see what a mistake this marriage was. The admission hung in the air. Wyatt stepped forward. Father? No, Nathaniel pointed at him. You've been making excuses for her since she arrived. Protecting her, giving her chances she hasn't earned. But tonight proved what I've known all along. She's going to undermine everything we've built. She's already started, turning the investors against me. They weren't turned against you, Emma interrupted. They were excited about new ideas, about growth, about the ranch being more than it is now. This ranch doesn't need to be more than it is now. It's perfect. I made it perfect. Nothing's perfect, Emma said quietly. And nothing stays the same forever. You can either grow or you can die. There's no standing still. Nathaniel's face went purple. For a moment, Emma thought he might actually hit her. Get out, he said, his voice shaking with rage. Both of you, get out of my sight. Wyatt took Emma's arm and led her from the office. They walked in silence until they were outside, away from the main house. I'm sorry, Emma said. I didn't mean to make things worse between you and your father. You didn't make anything worse. You just forced things that have been festering for years out into the open. Wyatt ran a hand through his hair. He's terrified, Emma. Of change, of losing control, of being proven wrong. That's what tonight was about. What happens now? Now we wait for the investment to come through. We implement your ideas about labor. We prove that change can be good. He looked at her, and we deal with my father's anger. Together. That night, Emma finally moved into the main house. Not because Nathaniel approved, but because Wyatt insisted, and Nathaniel was too furious to fight about it. Her new room was small but comfortable, with a real bed and a window that looked out over the valley. It felt strange being inside instead of separate, like she'd crossed some invisible line. She was unpacking her few belongings when someone knocked. Lucas poked his head in. I heard what happened at dinner, he said. The whole ranch is talking about it. Great, Emma muttered. No, it's good. The hands are impressed. Margaret's practically glowing. And Hank said, and I quote, maybe the girl's got more spine than sense, but at least she's got spine. Emma couldn't help but smile. High praise from Hank. The highest. Lucas hesitated. My father's going to make your life miserable for a while, just warning you. I figured, but Wyatt's on your side. That matters more than you think. Lucas started to leave, then turned back. And for what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. This place has been frozen for too long. Maybe you're exactly what we need to shake things loose." He left, and Emma sat on her new bed in her new room in the house that was supposedly now her home and let herself feel the weight of what had just happened. She'd stood up to Nathaniel, impressed the investors, started to earn respect from the ranch, and maybe, just maybe, started to become more than the invisible daughter who'd walked away from everything she'd ever known. But the real test was just beginning. Nathaniel wouldn't forget this, wouldn't forgive it. And Emma had a feeling that whatever came next would make tonight's dinner look easy. She was right. 3 days later, the ranch faced its first real crisis since her arrival, and Emma would find herself in the middle of it, forced to choose between safety and principle, between backing down and standing firm. And in that choice, everything would change. The crisis came at dawn, announced by gunshots echoing across the valley. Emma bolted upright in bed, heart hammering. More shots followed, then shouting. She threw on her work dress and ran outside to find the ranch already in chaos. Wyatt was mounted, along with a dozen hands, all armed. Hank was barking orders near the barn, while Lucas struggled to saddle another horse. "What's happening?" Emma called out. "Rustlers hit the north pasture," Jake shouted back, checking his rifle. "Took maybe 40 head in the night. They're making a run for the canyon." 40 cattle. Emma had learned enough to know what that meant. Thousands of dollars in losses, maybe tens of thousands, depending on the market. More than that, it was a direct challenge to the ranch's authority. If word got out that the Brooks Ranch could be hit without consequences, every opportunist in the territory would try their luck. Wyatt rode past, then wheeled his horse back. "Stay here," he told Emma. "Lock yourself in the house until we get back." "How many rustlers?" "Unknown. Maybe 6, maybe more." "And you're taking 12 men to chase them down?" "We don't have a choice." "Yes, you do." Emma's mind was racing, seeing the problem from angles Wyatt didn't have time to consider. They hit the north pasture because it's furthest from the house. They're expecting you to chase them. What if that's exactly what they want? Wyatt's jaw tightened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this might be a diversion. Take most of your men north, leave the main herd vulnerable, hit it while everyone's gone chasing shadows through the canyon." Emma looked at the remaining buildings, the corrals still full of valuable breeding stock. "You need to split your forces, half chase, half defend." Hank had ridden over in time to hear the last part. "She's got a point. The Cassidy gang pulled that exact trick over in Silver Creek last year. Lost the rustled cattle and another 100 while everyone was gone." Wyatt looked between them, the seconds ticking away. Every moment of hesitation let the rustlers get further away, but Emma saw the calculation in his eyes, weigh the guaranteed loss against the potential disaster. "Hank, take 6 men north," Wyatt decided. "Fast pursuit, but don't engage if they're fortified. I want to know numbers and position, nothing heroic. The rest stay here and secure the perimeter." "I'm going with Hank," Emma said. 3 voices responded in unison. "No." Emma ignored them, grabbing Rosie's reins from a nearby post. "You need every hand you can get. I can ride, I can shoot." "You can barely hit a fence post at 20 yards, Wyatt interrupted. "Then I'll hold horses or watch backs or do whatever else needs doing. But I'm not hiding in the house while everyone else fights for this ranch." Nathaniel's voice cut through the argument like a blade. "Let her go." Everyone turned. Nathaniel stood on the main house porch, fully dressed despite the early hour, watching the scene with cold calculation. "Father," Wyatt started, "if she wants to prove she belongs here, let her prove it." Nathaniel's smile was sharp. "Go on, Emma. Show us what you're made of." Emma saw the trap. Nathaniel hoping she'd get hurt, get scared, fail spectacularly, and prove she was wrong for this life. But she also saw that hesitating now would be worse than any danger ahead. She mounted Rosie and looked at Wyatt. "I'm going." He stared at her for a long moment, then cursed under his breath. "Stay behind Hank. Do exactly what he tells you. If shooting starts, you get to cover and stay there. Understood?" "Understood." They rode out in 2 groups, Hank's pursuit team heading north at a gallop, Wyatt's defense team spreading out to guard the ranch. Emma had never ridden this hard. Rosie, stretching out beneath her as they ate up ground. The sun was just breaking the horizon when they reached the north pasture. The scene told its own story. Fence cut in 3 places, hoof prints everywhere, clear trail heading toward the canyon system that marked the edge of Brooks' territory. Hank dismounted briefly, reading the signs with practiced eyes. 6 riders, maybe 7. Drove the cattle hard. They'll be exhausted within a few miles. Means the rustlers are planning to hold up somewhere close, not run them all the way to market. The canyon has a dozen places to ford up, one of the hands said. Could be anywhere. Or it could be simpler than that. Emma pointed to a separate set of tracks, barely visible in the dust. 2 riders split off here, heading east instead of north. Why would they do that unless they're circling back? Hank studied the tracks, then looked at Emma with grudging respect. Damn, she's right. Classic pincer. We chase into the canyon, they hit us from behind. So what do we do? Jake asked. Emma's mind was spinning, seeing the landscape like a chessboard. We split again. 4 follow the main trail, but stay cautious. 2 follow the eastern tracks and see where they lead. If I'm wrong, we've only lost a few minutes. If I'm right, we stop the ambush before it starts. Hank looked at her like she'd just sprouted a second head. Then he grinned. You heard the lady. Jake, Tom, you're with me on the main trail. Emma, you take Carson and Billy on the eastern track. Stay out of sight, stay safe, and fire 3 shots if you find something. Wyatt wasn't going to like this, Emma thought as she rode east with 2 ranch hands she barely knew. But Wyatt wasn't here, and she was committed now. The eastern trail wound through rougher country, rocky outcroppings and scattered brush that provided cover but made tracking harder. Carson, a quiet man in his 40s, took point while Billy, younger and nervous, kept checking behind them. There, Carson whispered, pointing ahead. 2 riders sat their horses in a small ravine, watching the main canyon trail through binoculars. They hadn't seen Emma's group yet, hidden as they were behind a rock formation. What now? Billy whispered. Emma's hands were shaking, but her mind was clear. We can't fight them. 3 against 2 sounds good until bullets start flying and someone dies. But we can make them think we're a bigger force than we are. How? Spread out. Make noise. Fire shots in the air, not at them. Make them think Hank brought the whole ranch down on them. Emma checked her rifle, making sure a round was chambered. On 3. They spread out, each taking a position 30 yards from the others. Emma counted down silently, then fired 3 shots into the air, the signal to Hank, but also the start of their bluff. Carson and Billy opened up immediately, shooting high and wide, but creating a wall of sound that echoed off the rocks and multiplied itself. The rustlers' horses spooked. One of the men fired back wildly, but they were rattled, couldn't see their attackers clearly, couldn't count numbers. Brooks Ranch, Emma shouted, deepening her voice as much as she could. You're surrounded. Drop your weapons. More shots from Carson and Billy, coordinated to sound like they were coming from 6 different positions instead of 3. The rustlers broke. They wheeled their horses and ran west, away from the canyon, away from their partners, abandoning the ambush entirely. Emma lowered her rifle, breathing hard. They'd done it. Pulled off a bluff that could have gotten them killed if the rustlers had called it. That was either brilliant or insane, Carson said, riding over. Haven't decided which yet. Hank appeared moments later with the rest of the pursuit team, having heard the shots and doubled back. He took in the scene, the abandoned position, the fleeing riders, Emma's group intact. You ran them off? We convinced them they were outnumbered, Emma said, her voice shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. They didn't stick around to check if we were telling the truth. Hank started laughing, a rough sound that turned into a genuine guffaw. You bluffed armed rustlers with 3 rifles and some shouting? Girl, you're either the luckiest or the craziest person I've ever met. Probably both, Emma admitted. They pursued the main group into the canyon, but without the ambush to support them, the rustlers abandoned the stolen cattle and scattered. By noon, all 40 head were recovered, and the threat was neutralized without a single shot fired in anger. The ride back to the ranch was triumphant. The hands were joking, retelling the story of Emma's bluff with embellishments that made it sound more dramatic than it had been. Carson kept shaking his head and muttering, "Surrounded," with a grin. But Emma's stomach was tight with nerves. She'd left Wyatt's orders, put herself in danger, and made tactical decisions she had no authority to make. He'd be furious. They rode into the main compound to find Wyatt waiting, his face unreadable. Hank reported immediately. All cattle recovered, no injuries, rustlers scattered. And you can thank your wife. She spotted the ambush before we rode into it and bluffed the bastards into running. Wyatt's eyes found Emma. Dismount. My office. Now. Emma's heart sank. She slid off Rosie and followed him into the house, acutely aware of the watching eyes. Ranch hands, Margaret in the doorway, Lucas peeking from the barn, and Nathaniel observing from an upper window. Wyatt's office was small and functional, dominated by a desk covered in ranch paperwork. He closed the door and turned to face her. I told you to stay behind Hank. I did stay behind him, until we split up. I told you to do exactly what he said. He told me to take 2 men and track the Eastern Riders. Wyatt's jaw worked. You could have been killed. So could everyone else out there, so could you. Emma met his eyes. You said I needed to prove I belong here. That's what I was doing. Not like that. Not by putting yourself in the line of fire against armed rustlers. His voice rose despite obvious effort to control it. Do you have any idea what would have happened if they'd called your bluff? If they'd started shooting for real instead of running? Yes, I'd be dead, and you'd be vindicated in every doubt you've ever had about me. The words came out harsher than she intended. Wyatt recoiled like she'd slapped him. You think that's what I want? You dead so I can say I was right? Isn't it? You brought me here because I could survive, because I was tough enough for ranch life. But every time I actually do something that proves it, you tell me I went too far. Emma's frustration boiled over. What do you want from me, Wyatt? To be strong, but not too strong. Capable, but not threatening. Useful, but not essential. I want you safe. I am safe. We all are, because we stopped the rustlers before anyone got hurt. They stood facing each other, both breathing hard, the argument hanging between them like smoke. Wyatt ran both hands through his hair, a gesture Emma was learning meant he was wrestling with something he didn't want to admit. My mother used to take risks, he said finally, his voice quiet now. Little ones at first, riding out alone to see the scenery, helping with cattle work she wasn't trained for. My father would get angry, she'd defend herself, they'd fight, and every time she'd push a little harder, trying to prove she belonged. Emma waited. Then one day she took a risk that didn't pay off. A horse threw her in rough country. She broke her leg in 3 places, lay there for hours before anyone found her. Wyatt's eyes were distant, seeing something Emma couldn't. My father blamed her for being reckless. She blamed him for making her feel like she had to prove herself. And after that, something broke between them that never healed. I'm not your mother, Emma said softly. I know, but I can't. He stopped, struggling. If something happened to you because I brought you here, because I put you in this position. Nothing happened. I made a choice, it worked out, and the ranch is better for it. This time, Emma stepped closer to him, forcing him to look at her. Every time I work with cattle, I could get trampled. Every time I ride, I could fall. Every time I repair equipment, something could break wrong and crush my hand. This ranch is dangerous, Wyatt. You knew that when you chose me. You can't protect me from every risk and still let me be useful. I can try. No, you can't. Emma's voice was firm, because if you do, I'll either break like your mother did, or I'll leave. Those are the only 2 options when someone's protected from everything that matters. Wyatt stared at her, and Emma saw the war in his expression, fear and respect, protectiveness and recognition, the weight of old wounds and the possibility of new trust. Finally, he exhaled. The hands are calling you the rustler whisperer. Emma blinked at the sudden shift. What? Hank started it. Now it's spreading. Apparently you're the woman who stopped cattle thieves by yelling at them. A smile tugged at his mouth despite obvious effort to stay stern. They're impressed. Terrified, but impressed. Are you? Wyatt was quiet for a long moment. Yeah, I am. He crossed to the window, looking out at the ranch. My father thinks today proved you're reckless, that you'll get people killed with your ideas and your risks. And what do you think? I think you saw a pattern no one else saw, made a call that saved lives and cattle, and pulled off a bluff that took more courage than I've shown in months of careful management. He turned back to her. I think I've been so worried about you failing that I didn't notice you were succeeding. Emma felt something loosen in her chest. But, Wyatt continued, you can't go rogue like that. If we're going to work together, really work together, I need to know what you're thinking before you ride off into danger. Can you do that? Can you stop treating me like I'm about to break? I can try. Then so can I. They stood there in the office, something shifting between them. Not quite partnership yet, but moving toward it, learning each other's edges, finding where they fit. A knock interrupted the moment. Nathaniel entered without waiting for permission, his face like stone. "The investors are here," he said. "Early. They want to discuss implementation of the new labor proposals." His eyes cut to Emma. "Your proposals?" Emma's stomach dropped. "I didn't know." "Of course you didn't, because you made promises without authority, created expectations we can't meet, and now we have to deal with the consequences." Nathaniel's voice was cold. "They're in the parlor. Try not to embarrass us more than you already have." He left. Emma looked at Wyatt, panic rising. "I didn't promise them anything specific. I just suggested—" "I know." Wyatt straightened his shirt, already moving into business mode. "Come on, let's see what they want." The investors, Harrison, Chen, and Blackwell, sat in the parlor looking fresh despite the journey. They stood when Emma and Wyatt entered, shaking hands with the warmth of men who smelled opportunity. "Mrs. Brooks," Mr. Chen said, "we've been eager to discuss your labor innovations in more detail." "They're not really my—" "She's modest," Mr. Harrison interrupted. "But we've been talking amongst ourselves since that dinner. The profit-sharing model, the land grants, the operational input. It's exactly the kind of forward thinking that separates successful operations from failed ones." Nathaniel sat rigidly in his chair, radiating disapproval. Mr. Blackwell pulled out a leather folder. "We've drafted preliminary terms for the investment. It includes implementation of Mrs. Brooks' suggestions, with metrics for success tracked quarterly. If the labor retention improves by the projected amounts, the investment increases. If it doesn't, we revisit the strategy." "That seems fair," Wyatt said carefully. "It's radical," Nathaniel interjected. "Giving workers ownership stakes dilutes family control. It's a slippery slope to losing everything we've built." "Or its evolution," Mr. Chen countered. "Mr. Brooks, with respect, your model worked brilliantly 30 years ago, but times change. Labor is scarce now, especially skilled labor. You're competing with railroads, mines, and growing cities for workers. You need an edge. The edge is good pay and fair treatment, which every ranch offers," Mr. Blackwell said. "Mrs. Brooks is proposing something different, a reason for workers to invest themselves in the ranch's success, not just collect a wage and leave when something better comes along." The argument continued, growing more heated. Emma sat quietly, watching Nathaniel's resistance harden with every point the investors made. This wasn't just about labor models. It was about control, about legacy, about admitting that his way might not be the only way. Finally, Mr. Harrison held up a hand. "Gentlemen, we're getting off track. The real question is simple. Are you willing to try this for 1 year? If it works, everyone profits. If it doesn't, we adjust. But we need commitment." All eyes turned to Wyatt. Emma could see the pressure on him, investors he needed, a father he respected despite everything, and her suggestions caught in the middle. This was the moment where he'd either support her ideas or throw them aside to keep peace. "I want to see the detailed proposal," Wyatt said. "Numbers, timelines, specific metrics. If they make sense, we implement. If they don't, we negotiate. But I'm not agreeing to anything blind." It was a politician's answer, committing to nothing while appearing reasonable. Mr. Chen smiled. "Fair enough. We'll have detailed documents ready by week's end. In the meantime," he looked at Emma. "Mrs. Brooks, would you be willing to draft an implementation plan? You understand the ranch's operations now. Show us how this would work in practice." Emma's mouth went dry. "I'm not sure I'm qualified." "You're more qualified than anyone else in this room to see both the theoretical benefits and the practical challenges," Mr. Blackwell said. "We're asking for your best thinking, not a perfect plan." Nathaniel made a sound of disgust and stood. "Do whatever you want, but when this fails, don't say I didn't warn you." He stormed out, slamming the door. The investors didn't seem bothered. They discussed a few more details, set another meeting for the following week, and departed with handshakes and encouraging words. When they were gone, Emma slumped in her chair, exhausted. "You just got assigned homework," Wyatt said, but there was humor in his voice. "I just painted a target on my back. Your father's going to make my life hell." He was already doing that. Wyatt sat across from her. "Emma, do you actually think this can work? The profit sharing, the land grants, all of it?" "I think it's worth trying. Worst case, it fails, and we're no worse off than before. Best case, we build something better. And middle case? Emma considered. Middle case, we create a model other ranches copy. Labor dynamics shift across the territory, and we get credit or blame for changing how this whole industry works. Wyatt whistled low. No pressure. None at all. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Wyatt said, "For what it's worth, I'm glad you're the one working on this. You see things I miss. And after today, after watching you spot that ambush and bluff those rustlers," he smiled, "I'm starting to think my father was right about one thing." "What's that?" "You're dangerous, just not in the way he meant it." Emma spent the next week buried in numbers and planning. She talked to every ranch hand willing to sit with her, asked about their concerns, their goals, what would make them stay versus what would make them leave. She drafted compensation models, land grant timelines, and operational input structures. Margaret helped, offering insights from years of watching ranch dynamics. Lucas contributed ideas from the younger workers' perspective. Even Hank grudgingly admitted that some of her proposals made sense, though he insisted on stress testing every assumption. Wyatt reviewed drafts each evening, challenging her thinking, but also defending the ideas to his father in increasingly tense family dinners. Nathaniel, meanwhile, worked to undermine everything. He spread doubts among the older hands, suggested Emma was trying to take over the ranch, implied that the investors were being manipulated by a woman who'd been there barely 2 months. The divide in the ranch grew obvious. Younger workers and those who'd seen Emma prove herself tended to support the changes. Older hands loyal to Nathaniel resisted, and everyone watched to see which way Wyatt would ultimately lean. The tension broke one night in Nathaniel's office. Emma wasn't supposed to be there. She'd been returning books to the ranch library when she heard raised voices and couldn't help but pause outside the door. "You're letting her destroy everything I built!" Nathaniel's voice was raw with fury. "I'm letting her try to save it," Wyatt shot back. "Your way is dying, Father. Labor turnover is killing our margins. Younger workers won't tolerate the old hierarchy. And if we don't adapt, someone else will and we'll be left behind." Adapt? You call giving away ownership stakes adapting? That's capitulation. It's investment in people. The same way you invested in land and cattle, just a different resource. People aren't resources. They're workers. They take orders, do their jobs, collect their pay. That's how it works. That's how it worked. Not anymore? There was a crash, something thrown or knocked over. "I should never have let you marry that girl. She's poisoned you against everything I taught you, everything that matters. She hasn't poisoned me against anything. She's shown me possibilities I was too close to see." Wyatt's voice was steel now. "And if you can't accept that, if you can't even try to trust my judgment, then maybe it's time we formalize the transition." Silence. Heavy and dangerous. "What are you saying?" Nathaniel asked, his voice low. "I'm saying the investors want me to have operational control. I've been resisting because I didn't want to push you out. But if you're going to fight every change, undermine every decision, poison the well against my wife," Wyatt paused, "then maybe it's better if we make the split official. You retire with full honors and financial security. I take over. Clean break." Emma's breath caught. This was the nuclear option, the thing that would fracture the family permanently. "You'd do that?" Nathaniel's voice shook. "You'd choose her over your own father?" "I'd choose the ranch's future over anyone's ego, including my own." Another long silence. Then footsteps, and Emma barely had time to duck into the library before Nathaniel stormed past, his face twisted with rage and something that looked like heartbreak. She waited until his footsteps faded, then emerged to find Wyatt standing in the office doorway. "How much did you hear?" he asked. "Enough!" Emma's hands were shaking. "Wyatt, I never meant for this to happen. If I'm causing a break between you and your father..." "You're not causing anything. This has been building for years. You just forced it to the surface." He looked exhausted. "My father built this ranch from nothing, literally carved it out of wilderness through sheer will and brutality. But he can't accept that the methods that worked then won't work now. And I can't keep pretending they will just to avoid hurting his pride." "What happens now?" "Now we present your plan to the investors. If they approve it, we implement it. And my father either accepts the new reality or we make the split official." Wyatt met her eyes. "I need to know you're committed, Emma, because if we do this and it fails, we'll have burned every bridge for nothing." Emma thought about the invisible girl she'd been in her father's house. The worthless daughter nobody saw. The free labor with no voice and no value. Then she thought about the woman who'd saved a calf, bluffed rustlers, impressed investors, and started to build something real. "I'm committed," she said. The investor meeting happened 3 days later. Emma presented her implementation plan with hands that shook at first, but steadied as she worked through the details. She showed retention projections, cost analyses, risk assessments, and timeline breakdowns. The investors asked hard questions. She answered them. They pushed on weak points. She acknowledged them and showed her contingencies. At the end, Mr. Chen leaned back in his chair and smiled. "It's ambitious, risky, could fail spectacularly." He looked at his partners. "I love it. We're in." The investment documents were signed that afternoon. Wyatt formally took operational control of the ranch, with Nathaniel maintaining ownership stakes but ceding decision-making authority. The labor reforms would begin implementation immediately. Nathaniel didn't attend the signing. He stayed in his private quarters, and Emma heard later that he'd been drinking, something he rarely did. That night, as Emma and Wyatt reviewed the signed documents in the office, Lucas burst in. "You need to come quick," he said, breathless. "Father's in the barn with the deed box. He's pulling out old contracts, going through everything. And he's got this look." Lucas's face was pale. "Something's wrong, really wrong." They found Nathaniel in the barn office, surrounded by papers spread across every surface. His hand shook as he flipped through yellowed contracts and correspondence. "Father," Wyatt approached carefully. "What are you doing?" Nathaniel looked up, and Emma saw something she'd never seen before. Fear in his eyes. "I made deals," he said, his voice rough. "Years ago, when I was building this place. Deals I'm not proud of. And if these reforms go through, if we start opening our books and operations to worker input," he gestured at the papers, "they'll find out. Everything will come out." Emma's stomach went cold. "What kind of deals?" Nathaniel laughed, bitter and broken. "The kind that got me land I shouldn't have. Water rights I didn't earn. Partnerships I betrayed. I built this empire on shortcuts and broken promises, and I told myself it was necessary, that the end justified the means." Wyatt stood frozen, processing. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough that if the wrong people start asking questions, we could lose half the ranch, maybe more." Nathaniel looked at his son, and Emma saw genuine anguish there. "I was protecting you, both of you, keeping the ugly truth buried so you could inherit something clean." "But it's not clean," Emma said quietly. "No, never was." Nathaniel's shoulders sagged. "And now your reforms, transparency, worker input, open books, will expose everything. The investors will pull out. We'll face lawsuits. Everything I built will collapse." The three of them stood in the barn office, the weight of generations of lies and compromises settling over them like dust. Emma looked at the papers, her mind already working. "Show me everything. All of it. Every deal, every shortcut, every broken promise." Nathaniel raised his head. "Why?" "Because if we're going to fix this, we need to know exactly how broken it is first." And so, late into the night, they began the painful work of excavating the truth, learning exactly what sins had built the Brooks Ranch and what it would cost to make them right. The papers told a story Emma wished she didn't have to read. Water rights stolen through forged surveys. Land acquired by forcing out a neighboring family through intimidation and burned crops. Partnership agreements with a man named Morrison, broken when Nathaniel cut him out after Morrison had secured the initial capital. Letters to officials that were barely disguised bribes. Contracts signed under names that didn't exist. By dawn, Emma's eyes burned from reading by lamplight, and her stomach churned with the scope of it all. "The Morrison deal is the worst," Wyatt said quietly, his face haggard. He held up a series of letters dated 15 years ago. Morrison invested everything he had to help Father buy the Northern Territory. They were supposed to be equal partners, but Father used a technicality in the paperwork to claim full ownership, then had Morrison run out of the territory when he protested. "Where's Morrison now?" Emma asked. "Dead. 5 years ago." Nathaniel's voice was flat. He sat slumped in a chair, looking older than Emma had ever seen him. His daughter inherited his claim to the partnership. She's been writing letters for years, threatening legal action. I've been ignoring them. You can't ignore her anymore, Emma said. Not if we're opening the books. I know. Nathaniel looked at the papers spread around them. So what do we do? Hide it all deeper? Pay her off to stay quiet? Pray nobody asks the right questions? Emma stood, pacing the small office. Her mind worked through scenarios, discarding options that felt wrong even if they were easier. We come clean, she said finally. Both men stared at her. That's insane, Nathaniel said. We'll lose everything. Maybe. Or maybe we control the narrative instead of letting it control us. Emma's thoughts crystallized as she spoke. We go to Morrison's daughter first, before the investors dig, before anyone else finds out. We acknowledge what happened, offer restitution, and make it right. Restitution could mean giving up half the Northern Territory, Wyatt pointed out. Then we give it up. Just like that? Years of work, thousands of dollars in value, the foundation of our expansion plans? You just hand it over? Emma met his eyes. Would you rather build an empire on lies and wait for it to collapse when the truth comes out anyway? Because it will come out, Wyatt. Truth always does. The only choice is whether we're the ones telling it. Nathaniel laughed bitterly. You've been here 3 months. 3 months? And you think you can just overturn decades of strategy with moral philosophy? I think decades of strategy built on fraud isn't strategy at all. It's just delayed consequences. Emma's voice was firm. And I think if we don't face those consequences now, on our terms, they'll face us later when we have no control over the outcome. Wyatt rubbed his face with both hands. The investors will pull out the moment they hear about this. Not if we present it right. Not if we show them we're taking responsibility and building something honest going forward. Emma moved to the table, spreading out the most damning documents. Look at this objectively. Morrison's daughter has a legitimate claim. The water rights were obtained illegally. The land deals were fraudulent. We can fight all of that in court for years, spending money and reputation we can't afford to lose. Or we can settle it, take the hit, and prove we're serious about reform. You're talking about giving away what I spent my life building, Nathaniel said, his voice breaking slightly. I'm talking about saving what you spent your life building, Emma countered, because right now it's built on sand. Let's put it on bedrock instead. Silence filled the barn office. Outside, the ranch was waking up, hands beginning the morning routines, cattle lowing, the ordinary sounds of a working operation that had no idea the foundation beneath it was crumbling. Finally, Wyatt spoke. If we actually do this, we need a plan. Not just moral conviction, but actual strategy. How do we approach Morrison's daughter? What do we offer? How do we present it to the investors without tanking the whole deal? We tell the truth, Emma said. All of it. We show them the problems and our solutions. We prove that we're trustworthy by being honest even when it costs us. That's idealistic as hell, Wyatt said. Maybe, but I'd rather fail honestly than succeed through fraud. Nathaniel stood abruptly, walking to the window. His back was to them, shoulders rigid. When he spoke, his voice was rough. I did what I thought I had to do. The territory was wild then. No law, no order, just whoever was strong enough to take what they needed. I told myself the ranch would bring stability, jobs, a future for this whole region. That justified the shortcuts. Did it? Emma asked quietly. He was silent for a long moment. I don't know anymore. Maybe it did then. Maybe it doesn't now. He turned to face them, and Emma saw tears tracking down his weathered face. I'm a bastard and a thief. I know that. But I'm also a father who doesn't want to watch everything his son worked for collapse because of his mistakes. Then help us fix it, Emma said. Not hide it, fix it. Nathaniel looked at Wyatt. You trust her judgment on this? Wyatt glanced at Emma and she saw something shift in his expression, a decision being made in real time. Yeah, I do. Then I guess we're confessing our sins. Nathaniel wiped his face roughly. Morrison's daughter lives in Silver Creek, about a day's ride. Her name is Sarah Morrison. She runs a boarding house. I'll go, Emma said immediately. No, Wyatt shook his head. This is family business. I should be the one. It needs to be me. Emma's voice was firm. She'll expect aggression from you or Nathaniel, a fight. But if I go, if another woman who wasn't part of the original deal comes to make it right, she paused, it changes the dynamic. Makes it clear this is about justice, not strategy. Wyatt looked like he wanted to argue, then sighed. You're probably right, but I'm coming with you. We do this together. They left that morning, taking the full set of documents that proved Morrison's claim and a proposal Emma had drafted in the hour before departure. The ride to Silver Creek was quiet, both of them processing what they were about to do. You know this could end the ranch, Wyatt said as they crossed into the next valley. If she demands full restitution, if the investors pull out, if word spreads about the fraud, we could lose everything. We could, Emma agreed, but we'd lose it with our integrity intact. That's worth something. Is it? Is integrity worth more than the ranch, the jobs, everything we're trying to build? Emma thought about her father's house, about being invisible and worthless while everyone took what she offered and gave nothing back, about Lydia's comfortable life built on Emma's silent labor, about all the small injustices that accumulated until they became a life not worth living. Yes, she said, because what's the point of building something if the foundation is rotten? Eventually it falls anyway. Better to start with something solid, even if it's smaller. Wyatt was quiet for a while. Then, when I chose you, I thought I was just getting someone strong enough to survive ranch life. I didn't expect to get someone who'd make me question everything I thought I knew. Is that a complaint? No, it's probably the best decision I ever made. They reached Silver Creek by late afternoon. It was a small town, the kind that serviced ranches and mines but had no real industry of its own. Morrison's boarding house sat on the main street, a two-story building that had seen better days but was clean and well-maintained. A woman in her 30s answered the door, brown hair pulled back, strong features, eyes that assessed them with practiced wariness. Sarah Morrison? Emma asked. Who's asking? Emma Brooks. This is my husband Wyatt. We're from the Brooks Ranch. Sarah's expression hardened instantly. Come to threaten me again? Tell me to stop writing letters or there'll be consequences? No, Emma said. We came to make things right. Sarah laughed, sharp and bitter. Right, sure you did. Look, I don't have time for games. I run a business here. I've got boarders to feed. Your father was cheated, Wyatt said quietly. By mine. And we have proof. We're here to return what was stolen. Sarah's laughter died. She stared at them like they'd spoken a foreign language. You're serious? Completely, Emma said. Can we come in? They sat in Sarah's small private parlor while she read through the documents, the original partnership agreement, the forged amendment that gave Nathaniel full ownership, the letters showing how Morrison had been forced out. Her hands shook as she read. Tears fell onto the papers. I was 12 when Father came back from the ranch, she said finally, her voice thick. He was broken. Not just financially. They'd beaten him too, your father's men. Broke 3 ribs and his spirit. He spent the rest of his life trying to get justice, and everyone told him to let it go. That he couldn't fight the Brooks family. That he was a fool for trusting in the first place. He wasn't a fool, Emma said. He was betrayed. By someone he had every right to trust. And now you're here to what? Say sorry and make it all better? Sarah's voice was angry, but underneath was something else. Hope, maybe, that she was trying hard to suppress. We're here to offer restitution, Wyatt said. He pulled out the proposal Emma had drafted. The Northern Territory, 50,000 acres that your father helped buy. We're prepared to deed half of it back to you, along with a formal acknowledgement of the fraud, financial compensation for the years of lost income, and a public apology. Sarah read the proposal twice, her expression unreadable. Why? Why would you do this? Because it's right, Emma said simply. And because we're trying to build something honest. We can't do that on a foundation of theft. Your family destroyed mine. My father died still fighting for justice. You think some land and an apology makes up for that? No, Wyatt said. Nothing makes up for that, but it's a start toward doing better. Sarah set down the papers carefully, like they might explode. I could take this to court. With these documents, I'd win. I could probably get the whole Northern Territory, maybe more. You could, Emma agreed, but that would take years, cost money you might not have, and come with no guarantees. This way it's settled, clean. You get what's rightfully yours, and we all move forward. Why do you care? Sarah looked at Emma specifically. You weren't even part of this. This happened before you existed in their world. You could have stayed quiet, enjoyed the ranch, Let the men fight their battles. Emma thought about that invisible girl scrubbing floors, about Lydia's tears that were really about losing her own future, about all the times she'd been told to be quiet, stay small, not make waves. Because silence makes you complicit, Emma said. And I'm done being complicit in other people's injustice. Sarah's eyes filled with tears again. If I accept this, if I take the land and the apology, it means forgiving what was done to my father. I don't know if I can do that. You don't have to forgive, Wyatt said. Just accept restitution. The rest is yours to work through however you need. Sarah stood, walking to the window. The silence stretched until Emma thought they'd failed. Then, I accept on one condition. Name it, Wyatt said. The public apology. It can't be some quiet letter or private settlement. It needs to be real, announced. So everyone who told my father he was crazy, everyone who said the Brooks family was untouchable, they all know he was right. Done, Emma said immediately. And I want to be involved in developing the Northern Territory. Not just as a landowner, but as an actual partner. The way my father was supposed to be. Wyatt glanced at Emma. She nodded. Agreed, Wyatt said. We'll draw up formal partnership papers. Equal say in all decisions regarding that land. Sarah turned from the window, and Emma saw her father's vindication written across her face. Then we have a deal. They shook hands. A moment that felt like history shifting, like something old and poisonous finally being lanced and drained. The ride back to the ranch was quiet but different. They'd done something that felt impossible, and the weight of it sat heavy but clean between them. The investors are going to hear about this, Wyatt said as the ranch came into view. We need to tell them before Sarah makes the announcement. Tomorrow morning, Emma said. First thing, no delays. But when they arrived at the ranch, they found the investors already there, all three of them, sitting in the parlor with Nathaniel, whose face was ashen. What's happened? Wyatt asked immediately. Mr. Chen stood. We got a letter this afternoon. Anonymous. Detailing irregularities in the ranch's land acquisitions and partnership agreements, specifically mentioning Morrison. His eyes were hard. Care to explain? Emma's stomach dropped. Someone had sent the information ahead of them, someone who wanted to control the narrative, make them look defensive instead of proactive. Who sent it? She asked. Does it matter? What matters is whether it's true. Wyatt squared his shoulders. It's true. All of it. And we were going to tell you tomorrow, after we'd secured restitution for Morrison's daughter. Mr. Harrison's eyebrows rose. You secured restitution? When? Today. We rode to Silver Creek, met with Sarah Morrison, and agreed to deed half the Northern Territory back to her along with financial compensation and a public apology. The investors exchanged glances. Let me understand this, Mr. Blackwell said slowly. You discovered fraud in your land holdings, and instead of burying it or fighting it in court, you voluntarily gave up half of your most valuable expansion territory? Yes, Emma said, because it was the right thing to do. The right thing? Mr. Harrison laughed, but it wasn't mocking. Do you have any idea how rare that is in this business? How many operators would have fought tooth and nail to keep illegal gains? Most of them, Mr. Chen said. He looked at Wyatt, then Emma, then back. I'll be honest, when we got that letter, I thought we were done, that we'd invested in a fraudulent operation and would have to pull out immediately. You still can, Wyatt said. We'll understand if— Shut up, Brooks, Mr. Blackwell interrupted. We're not pulling out, we're doubling down. Emma blinked. What? You just proved exactly what we were betting on when we invested in your labor reforms, Mr. Chen explained. That this ranch is willing to prioritize integrity over profit. That's the kind of operation that succeeds long-term, because people trust it. Workers, partners, communities, they all invest more when they believe in the foundation. So you're not concerned about the lost land? Wyatt asked carefully. Of course we're concerned. It's a significant asset loss, but you replaced it with something more valuable. Credibility. Mr. Harrison pulled out his pocket watch, checking the time. Now, who sent that anonymous letter, and what do they want? I can answer that, Nathaniel said quietly from his chair. Everyone had almost forgotten he was there. It was me. The room froze. Father, Wyatt started. Let me finish. Nathaniel stood, moving slowly like every year of his age had suddenly caught up with him. I sent it because I wanted to see what you'd do, whether you'd fold when confronted with the truth, whether you'd lie to protect the investment, whether you'd sacrifice principle for profit. He looked at Emma, and his expression was complicated, respect and resentment tangled together. You did exactly what I hoped you wouldn't, exactly what I feared you would. Why would you hope? Emma began. Because if you'd folded, I could have convinced myself I was right, that integrity doesn't matter, only strength does, that my methods were justified. Nathaniel's voice was heavy. But you didn't fold. You went straight into the fire and came out holding the truth, consequences be damned. And that means I have to face something I've been avoiding for 30 years. What's that? Mr. Chen asked. That I built something impressive on a foundation of shit, and my son is trying to rebuild it on bedrock, even if it's smaller. Nathaniel looked at Wyatt. I fought you every step, undermined Emma, tried to prove you were making a mistake. But watching her today, watching both of you choose integrity when it cost you everything, I realized something. He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. I'm proud of you, and I'm sorry I made it so hard to do the right thing. Wyatt stared at his father like he'd never seen him before. Father, I don't. Nathaniel held up a hand. I don't deserve forgiveness yet. Maybe not ever, but I'm stepping back. Completely. The ranch is yours now, truly yours. Run it however you think best. With her. He nodded at Emma. She's got more courage in her little finger than I've had in my whole life. The silence that followed was profound. Finally, Mr. Chen cleared his throat. Well, that was unexpected, but it does clarify things. The investment stands. We'll adjust the terms to account for the reduced Northern Territory, but the labor reforms proceed as planned. And we'll be watching to see if your commitment to transparency holds up when it's less dramatic. It will, Emma said firmly. Good. The investors stood, preparing to leave. We'll be back next month for the first quarterly review. Try not to give away any more land before then. After they left, Nathaniel excused himself to his quarters. Lucas appeared from wherever he'd been hiding, his eyes wide. Is it over? He asked. The fighting, the tension, all of it? Not over, Wyatt said, but maybe starting to heal. That night, Emma stood on the porch of the main house. Her house now, really hers, and looked out over the valley. The ranch spread before her in the moonlight, smaller than it had been yesterday, but somehow more solid. Wyatt joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Hell of a day, he said, handing her one. Hell of a few months. They stood in comfortable silence, drinking coffee and watching the land they'd chosen to save through truth instead of protect through lies. I've been thinking, Wyatt said eventually, about what you said when I first asked you to come here, about being invisible. Emma remembered that conversation in her family's garden a lifetime ago. You're not invisible anymore, Wyatt continued, to the ranch hands, to the investors, to my father, and definitely not to me. He paused. I'm seeing you, Emma. Really seeing you. Not just as someone useful, but as someone essential. Emma felt something warm unfold in her chest. I'm seeing you too. Not the rancher who needed a wife, but the man trying to build something better than what he inherited. Wyatt turned to face her fully. When I chose you, it was strategic, practical. I needed someone strong, and you were strong. I know, but now... He reached for her hand, tentative, asking permission. She gave it. Now I'm choosing you again, not because I need you, but because I want you, because you make me better, make this place better, make everything better. Emma's throat tightened. That's the first time anyone's ever chosen me for who I am instead of what I can do. Then everyone else was blind. Wyatt squeezed her hand. I'm choosing you, Emma. Not the worker, not the strategy, not the solution to my problems. Just you. She looked up at him, this man who'd seen her worth in calloused hands and decided to give her a chance and made her own choice. Then I'm choosing you back. She smiled. And this time I'm not doing it to escape or survive. I'm doing it because I want to build this life with you. He kissed her then, not the formal brush of lips from their wedding, but something real and full of promise. When they broke apart, Emma was surprised to find tears on her cheeks. What happens now? She asked. Now we rebuild. Implement the labor reforms, develop the Northern Territory with Sarah as a real partner, Prove that integrity and profit can coexist. Wyatt smiled. And we do it together, partners in everything. Partners, Emma agreed. Over the following months, the ranch transformed. The labor reforms rolled out with mixed results. Some workers embraced the profit sharing immediately. Others remained skeptical until the first quarterly payouts proved it was real. Turnover dropped by 40% in the first 6 months, and applications for positions tripled. Sarah Morrison became an active partner, bringing fresh perspectives and connections that opened new markets. The Northern Territory, though halved, was developed more efficiently through actual collaboration instead of one-man dictates. Nathaniel slowly integrated back into ranch life, but differently. He worked alongside the hands instead of commanding from above. He listened to Emma's ideas instead of dismissing them. And while he and Wyatt would never have an easy relationship, they began rebuilding something more honest than what had existed before. Word spread about the Brooks Ranch's voluntary restitution and labor reforms. Other operations started asking questions, implementing similar programs. The territorial newspaper ran a feature article. Investors from as far as San Francisco came to observe the model in action. Emma found herself thrust into a role she'd never imagined. Advisor to other ranches, speaker at industry gatherings, voice for a new way of doing business. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. But the moment that mattered most came 6 months after the restitution, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Emma was in the barn helping to treat a sick calf when a wagon arrived. She didn't pay much attention until Margaret called her name. "Emma, you have visitors!" She wiped her hands and walked outside to find a familiar wagon and 2 familiar faces, Lydia and her mother. Emma's first instinct was to walk away, but she'd changed too much for that now. "What do you want?" she asked, not unkindly, but not warmly either. Her mother looked older, thinner, the pride that had armored her worn down to something more fragile. Lydia looked worse. Her beautiful dress was mended, her hair less perfectly styled, her eyes carrying the weight of hard lessons learned. "We came to apologize," her mother said quietly. Emma waited. "Your father," her mother's voice broke. "He's lost the farm. Debt's caught up with him. We have nothing left. And Lydia's engagement, it fell through. The man she was supposed to marry found someone with money." "I'm sorry," Emma said, and meant it despite everything. "We were wrong," Lydia said, stepping forward. "About you, about everything. You tried to tell me that day in the parlor that you'd been invisible your whole life. I didn't understand what you meant, but I do now." "What happened?" Lydia laughed bitterly. "I became you. The invisible daughter who works and sacrifices while everyone else takes. Mother's been sick, really sick this time, and father won't pay for a doctor because money's too tight. So I work. I clean houses in town, take in laundry, do anything to pay for medicine. And I'm invisible, just like you were." Emma felt the familiar ache of old wounds, but also something else, the realization that she'd escaped a fate Lydia was just now discovering. "Why are you telling me this?" Emma asked. "Because I want you to know I understand now. And I'm sorry. For every time I took what you offered without thanks. For every time I let Father treat you like nothing while I got everything. For not seeing you." Lydia's voice shook. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to say it." Emma looked at her sister. Beautiful, broken Lydia, who'd been raised to believe her worth was in her appearance and her marriage prospects, and was now learning what happened when those things failed. "I forgive you," Emma said quietly. "Not because you deserve it, but because holding on to anger would make me into something I don't want to be." Her mother sobbed. Lydia's face crumpled. "Is there anything—" Her mother couldn't finish the question. Emma could have said no, could have sent them away to face the consequences they'd earned. The old Emma, the invisible, worthless Emma, might have even welcomed the chance for revenge, but that Emma was gone. "Margaret needs help in the house," Emma said. "And we're expanding operations, which means more cooking, more cleaning, more work than one person can handle. It's hard labor, long hours, and it pays honestly, but not extravagantly." "You're offering us jobs?" Lydia asked, stunned. "I'm offering you a chance. Same one I got. But here's the difference. You'll be seen, your work will matter, and you'll build something real instead of maintaining someone else's comfort." Emma paused. "But if you take it, you work like everyone else. No special treatment, no playing the victim. No expecting extra just because we're family. You earn your keep or you leave. Her mother looked at the ranch, at the solid buildings and working operation, and Emma saw the pride warring with desperation. We'll take it, Lydia said before their mother could speak. And we'll earn it. I promise. Emma nodded to Margaret, who'd been listening from the porch. Get them settled. Standard worker housing to start. They can earn better if they prove themselves. Margaret led them away, and Emma stood watching, feeling the strange fullness of closing a circle she hadn't known was open. Wyatt appeared beside her. You didn't have to do that. I know, but they're broken the way I was broken, and someone gave me a chance when I needed it. She looked at him. Seems only right to pass that along. Even after everything they did? Especially after everything they did. Because that's what makes it a choice instead of an obligation. I'm not doing this because I have to. I'm doing it because I can. That evening, the ranch gathered for dinner. Hands, family, partners, all sitting at the long table together. Sarah Morrison was there, discussing irrigation plans with Hank. Lucas was arguing good-naturedly with some of the younger workers about horse training methods. Margaret served food while Lydia helped, learning the rhythms of this new life. Nathaniel sat at the head of the table, but he didn't dominate it anymore. He listened more than he spoke, learning from his son and daughter-in-law instead of dictating to them. And Emma sat beside Wyatt, her hand resting on the table where he could reach it if he chose, looking at the life she'd built from nothing, not inherited, not given, built. After dinner, she walked out to the overlook where she'd stood that first night, terrified and uncertain. The valley spread below her, the ranch lights twinkling like stars brought to earth. You did it, Wyatt's voice came from behind her. Everything you said you would. The labor reforms are working. The ranch is thriving. Even my father's starting to change. We did it, Emma corrected. I couldn't have done any of this alone. Neither could I. That's the point. He moved to stand beside her. You know what I realized today? When you gave your family jobs instead of revenge? What? That you're not just strong, you're good, and that's rarer and more valuable than any skill you could have. He paused. I chose you because I thought you could survive this place, but you did something better. You made it worth surviving. Emma leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. I spent my whole life being chosen for what I could do, being useful, being invisible unless I was working. And then you chose me for the same reason, because I could handle the ranch, because I was strong enough. I know, I'm sorry for that. Don't be. Because what you didn't realize was that by choosing me for that reason, you gave me the chance to become someone who deserved to be chosen for other reasons. You didn't see me as valuable, despite my work. You saw my work as evidence of my value. Nobody ever did that before. She turned to face him. And now I'm not invisible. I'm not worthless. I'm not the forgotten daughter who exists only to serve. I'm Emma Brooks, and I helped build this place. I proved I'm worth more than my ability to scrub floors and keep quiet. You proved you're worth everything, Wyatt said. And I'm choosing you, Emma, every day. Not because I need a partner for the ranch, but because I need you. I'm choosing you too. Because you saw me when I was invisible. Because you gave me the chance to prove I was more than what my family told me I was. Because you're trying to build something better than what you inherited, even when it's hard. They stood together on the overlook, two people who'd been broken by the expectations of others and had chosen to rebuild themselves into something stronger, something honest, something real. Below them, the ranch lights glowed. The land they'd fought for, sacrificed for, chosen to build honestly instead of protect through lies. It was smaller than it could have been if they'd kept the fraud hidden, less impressive than an empire built on shortcuts and stolen land. But it was theirs, built on bedrock instead of sand, earned instead of taken. And Emma, the invisible daughter who'd been told her whole life that she was worth nothing more than her ability to work, stood at the center of it all and knew the truth. She hadn't inherited this life. She hadn't been given it. She'd built it. With her own hands, her own courage, her own refusal to accept that invisible meant worthless. And now, looking out over the valley with Wyatt beside her, she finally understood what it meant to be chosen not for what you could do, but for who you were. She understood what it meant to choose yourself first, and then choose to build something with someone who saw your worth. She understood that sometimes the most radical thing you could do was refuse to disappear, refuse to be less than you were, Refuse to accept that your only value was in your silence and service. Emma had walked away from everything she'd ever known with nothing but a carpet bag and a stranger's promise. She'd faced contempt, doubt, and hatred. She'd learned new skills, made impossible choices, and rebuilt foundations that should have destroyed her. And she'd emerged not as the invisible daughter, not as the desperate choice, not as the woman who survived despite the odds, but as Emma Brooks, partner, advisor, reformer, builder, chosen and choosing, seen and seen, valuable not despite her work, but because of everything she was. The ranch stretched before her, imperfect and honest and real. And Emma smiled because she'd finally found what she'd been searching for without knowing she was searching at all. A place where she wasn't invisible, a life she'd built instead of one she'd been given, and a future that was hers to write,